Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Welcome in. Hope you're having a wonderful Friday. Welcome to the July newsroom analysis live stream. Put a 1 in the chat if you show up and you can hear me, because that lets me know that I'm actually talking to someone, not just shouting into the void. All right, can anyone hear me and see me? I swear, every time I do one of these live streams, there's some new fun thing that gets thrown in the mix that just kind of like throws a wrench, throws me for a loop. This time it's my webcam. For whatever reason, it keeps shutting off, and I am really not sure why. So if that happens again, I'll probably have to get up and fix it again. But I'm really hoping that I adjusted the settings correctly and that doesn't happen, so we can keep going and get into this live stream. So if this is your first newsroom analysis that you're tuning into, yes, there is usually some type of technical difficulty or abnormality. I wish this was like such a smooth, polished process that it felt like you were just watching one of my other episodes, one of my like regular podcast episodes. But unfortunately, that is not the nature of going live on the internet. So there are always little things that you're having to kind of adjust to on the fly. So I apologize for that if that disrupts your viewing experience. Hopefully, once we start getting into the meat and taters of what we're talking about here today, all that stuff will kind of fade into the backdrop. So with the newsroom analysis, I sit down at the end of every month, and over the previous month, I have news headlines, articles that are sent to my inbox via Google Alerts that I have set up, and I save those, the relevant headlines, things that I know I want to talk about, to a folder. And then at the end of that month, we gather here on my YouTube channel, and live I go read through all of the news articles. There usually are quite a few, and there's usually some pretty interesting little things that end up coming out from everything that happened in the past month. And then we get to discuss what I found and what you think about the articles that we're reading. It's something that I want to do for a couple of different reasons. The first is because it creates a little bit of an archive of past events. I think history moves faster and faster with every generation, and memories become shorter and shorter, and it can be really easy to forget that really crucial things happened not all that long ago, and that we need to continue to keep an eye on important issues, especially for me in my arena, issues relating to human rights. And these articles give us a way to kind of keep a finger on the pulse, create an archive of past events, and also engage our critical thinking skills and take a look at current events from different perspectives. Because during the newsroom analysis, I don't just look at North American news media. I'm pulling from literally all around the world. And with that, of course, there is a language barrier. Sometimes we're dealing with the translate function that I have on my browser, which I recently switched to Firefox, and the translator that it has, the plugin, is a little bit better than Google Translate, but it's still not flawless. So we are dealing with a little bit of a language barrier, but I think it's important to highlight how nothing that is happening in our world, nothing that we are living through currently, is occurring within a vacuum. Literally everything is connected to everything else in one way or another. We're all part of this lived experience, and we're in it together, and there's nothing that we can do to avoid that. So I think it's important to be aware of it, and this is not about awareness so that we can be afraid, right? I'm not encouraging a fear-based reaction to the content that I am presenting, these issues that I think are of public concern, but more so that we can move through the world as informed people. And that's actually one of the reasons why I like doing this at the end of the month. I know some people have complained about the length of these live streams. Luckily, the beautiful thing about podcasts and YouTube and most technology now that you use to consume video media, it will save your place whenever you leave, so you can always come back and pick it up again if you can't finish it in one sitting. I understand not everyone likes that, but one reason why I do like taking everything, kind of throwing it into a basket at the end of the month and then just going through it, is because we're not reading things kind of as they're coming out. We're looking back maybe only a few weeks retrospectively, but we're looking back at the past instead of being in this kind of more reactionary place that I feel like our 24-hour news cycle that we live with keeps us in. So again, this is not about being afraid. This is about being informed. This is about using our critical thinking skills. This is about having a holistic worldview. This is about helping to educate ourselves and educate the people that we care about. This is about hopefully working to create a better, more free world. Although, man, it really feels like it's an uphill battle sometimes. So anyway, I'm seeing you guys popping off in the chat. I kept kind of glancing over as I was talking and like getting distracted a little bit. Glad to see my chat etiquette disclaimer popped up when people came in. Remember, the golden rule does apply, and like my mom always used to say, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. That doesn't mean that you can't disagree with something that I'm saying. I encourage disagreement. I encourage discourse. Just don't be nasty about it. That's not going to fly. And don't come in here thinking that you have everything figured out and that we all need to listen to what you have to say, because trust and believe, nobody truly has it all figured out. I think if we did, things would be a little bit more clear. Hi, Peggy. Nice to see you. Hi, Rick. Somebody said, let us know what number you want on your roller hoover ball uniform. I don't know what a roller hoover ball uniform is, so I don't know if that's supposed to be a compliment or an insult. Went right over my head. All right, so while you guys are coming in, I'm going to go ahead and get into it because we do have a lot of articles to go over. Like I said, if you would like to read through these at your own pace or read along while I am reading, you can pull up the source document in the description of this live stream, and that is a Google Docs document that has all of the links that I'll be reading here today, and you can go through them at your leisure, share the document, pretty much do whatever you want with it. So let me go ahead and get set up. Alrighty. Sticky fingers on the mouse pad. Okay. Get my chat pulled back up so I can see what you guys have to say while we're reading through here. And this is our first article. This is from El Diario. This is translated from Spanish to English. Opus Dei is number 2, formally accused of trafficking women in Argentina. This is big news. This is further developments in a case that has been playing out, building up over the last several years, ever since 43 former domestic workers, some might say alleged slaves, of Opus Dei came forward alleging, that they were never compensated, that they were never paid, that the conditions that they lived through were horrific, that they were exposed to really coercive, abusive treatment, all these other things, and it's been building up steam for quite some time. This is the latest development. This is as of July 2nd, written by Paula Bistagnino, one of my absolute faves. It says the current auxiliary vicar of the prelature and first in succession to its leader, Father Mariano Fazio, has been formally charged by 3 Argentine prosecutors in the case of trafficking poor women into slavery. The accusation is overwhelming. Father Mariano Fazio, first in line to become the supreme leader of the Prelature of the Holy Cross and Opus Dei, was part of the system of trafficking poor women for labor exploitation that the Opus Dei designed and executed for at least 4 decades in Argentina, his country, and which had at least 43 victims. This is stated in the 8-page document to which El Diario had exclusive access, which requests that he be summoned for questioning along with 4 other religious figures. These are religious figures who were at different points in different places within the Opus Dei hierarchy within that country. In 2024, after 2 years of an unprecedented secret investigation, Argentina's Anti-Trafficking in Persons Prosecutor's Office, PROTEX, and the Third National Correctional Prosecutor's Office filed formal charges against the highest-ranking members of Opus Dei in Buenos Aires. The request summoned former regional vicars Carlos Nanye, Patricio Olmos, and Victor Arastazu for questioning. It was notable that Fazio, who had held the same position during the interim period between the two vicars, was not named. And my webcam just went to sleep again, so give me one moment while I try to figure that out and wake it back up. One moment. All right, back online. This live stream is going to be interesting if I have to keep getting up every 10 minutes to wake my camera up. Well, we might have to, we'll see how it goes. Anyway, where was I? So Fazio, the newly accused in this situation, arrived in Rome in 2014, a year after his fellow countryman Jorge Mario Bergoglio became Pope Francis. The appointment, initially as Vicar General, was no coincidence. The then leader of Opus Dei, Javier Echevarria, brought him to get closer to the Jesuit who, although newly arrived at the Vatican, was already showing a reformist imprint that alarmed them. According to sources close to Opus Dei in the Vatican, the intention was to control Francis, with whom Fazio maintained a cordial relationship in Buenos Aires. So I think that's pretty interesting. It kind of also reinforces the general perception that I think I had and a lot of other people had when Francis was still alive, which was that he was very inconvenient for Opus Dei and for a lot of other more conservative movements within the church. And I can definitely understand why there might have been this desire to control him, as they say here. But it's really interesting to read that in print. And I think it also puts into perspective the outside forces, known and unknown, recognized and unrecognized, that are influencing or in the ear of a leader, like a pope or a king or a president or anything like that. Again, like I said at the beginning, nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything is kind of connected in some way, shape, or form. And so to think that like somebody could just be in an office and be unilaterally making the decision to do things and not have people in their ear, I think it can be kind of easy to forget that that's pretty much always the case. But anyway, the article goes on. The formal request for indictment issued on June 11th by prosecutors Alejandra Maniagano, Marcello Colombo, and Eduardo Tiano is addressed to federal judge Daniel Rafegas and maintains that the evidence available to the other defendants is sufficient to also charge the second most important member of Opus Dei in the world. Opus Dei's main headquarters in Argentina is located in the Recoleta neighborhood. I apologize for any mispronunciations. One of the most expensive in Buenos Aires. There, in a building that occupies more than a quarter of a block and was built on land donated by one military dictatorship and with subsidies from another, the organization's highest authorities, including the entire religious leadership, live there. There, too, in a tower with almost bricked-up windows, Leia, the organization's largest residence for servicewomen, operated and still operates maids who served the men in the hierarchy without receiving any payment for their work and in semi-confined conditions. Mariano Fazio lived there for many years, including the 4 years he was regional vicar, and the main witness in the investigation worked there. So I just recently finished reading Anne Marie Allen's most recent literary work, or maybe it's her first, Serve. I have it right here behind me. It's about her, it's the full title is Serve, My Lost Years in the Heart of Ireland's Opus Dei, and it's her experience being recruited as a teenager into Opus Dei as an assistant numerary under the guise of attending this cookery school to get a culinary arts certificate of some sort. And that ended up being a complete farce. There was no certificate, or the certificate that some of the girls were given was good for nothing. It wasn't accredited or recognized in any way. And Anne Marie ended up being sucked into Opus Dei and ended up spending a number of years there, being sort of shuffled around. In her book, she uses the term trafficked, and I have to agree with that description, trafficked around to these different Opus Dei centers, buildings, and things in Ireland to cook and clean every single inch and for all of the people who were living there. The book it's really something. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend, please, if you can afford to support Anne Marie, you can order it on Amazon very easily, which is what I did. A small part of the proceeds go back to her, and I know that reading her story, more than anything, more than the proceeds, reading her story would mean all of the world to her. And it really puts into perspective the experience that these women and girls have had and are having, ostensibly, allegedly, within these Opus Dei centers and in these training centers or whatever. It's really beyond the pale. Like, as bad as I could have thought that it was, and I know that it's bad, reading at least Anne Marie's experiences really threw everything into sharp relief for me. And there are a few things in particular that I'm not going to get into just yet, because I am going to be speaking more about this book on my channel, so I don't want to do all of that now. But there were a few things specifically in that book that just really jumped out at me and highlighted just how extreme Anne Marie's and the other girls that she was with at that time, the experience that they had. It was beyond the pale. So if you have read it, sound off in the chat, let me know what you thought. And if you haven't yet, I highly recommend. Like I said, it was really, really good. And it's really sad to think that there are still women and girls who are potentially living in conditions like that, or living under conditions like that. It's really very disturbing to me, honestly. It says the case in Argentina, which could have repercussions in other countries, involves 43 cases of exploitation. However, the vast majority of the complainants managed to leave Opus Dei before 2008. Some had to flee, and the date the anti-trafficking law came into force, and therefore only 4 of the total cases fall under this crime. So the statute of limitations would be up for the others, I guess. Meanwhile, the statute of limitations, it's already up. There's a 12-year statute of limitations. The accusation centers on the case of a Bolivian woman who was recruited as a minor and worked as a maid for 31 years. MIE, her initials, was called to testify for the second time in April 2025. Then, before Judge Rafecas, the key witness expanded her testimony and stated that she knew Father Mariano Fazio, having met him at the Opus Dei World Headquarters in Rome. She had been sent as a maid and he as a member of the hierarchy, and at the headquarters in Buenos Aires, where she had also worked for many years. The woman claimed that between 2009 and 2014, she was assigned to clean Fazio's room precisely during the period when he was regional vicar. MIE also recounted her experience with Vicar Carlos Nanye, Fazio's predecessor in Buenos Aires, who was based in Rome when Fazio arrived to influence Pope Francis. Nanye is also accused in court of the same charges. MIE recounted that during the meditations, daily religious ceremonies in the Opus Dei oratories, Father Nanye told them that wanting to leave the work was like leaving the boat, and that one of the things they had to convince themselves of was that leaving the boat was sudden death. He also said that to do so, they had to render their judgment, burn themselves for God, make a holocaust for God. Which, that's just really extreme language, in my opinion. A really, really extreme way of talking about living in alignment with whatever your vocational calling is supposed to be in this organization. Talking in like extreme terms like that, I don't know, that jumped out at me the first time that I read it. I really thought that just was an interesting way to phrase that. And I also kind of just, from things that I've read, be it in Gareth Gore's Opus or from different testimonies, accounts from former members on places like Opus Libris or Opus Dei Exposed, like very extreme language like that doesn't really seem to be super rare. And even in Anne-Marie's book, there are, which is like the most recent example that I have, but there are like several examples of people speaking in like very extreme terms like that, like really driving home how being in this organization is a matter of life and death, and that if you don't do the utmost, even if that includes flaying your skin open and like being in like just excruciating physical pain, if that's what it takes, right? If you have to burn yourselves, if you have to make a holocaust of yourself and your experience in order to persist in this thing that you are in, then that's good and you should be doing it. That's essentially what is being said. I've heard similar things other places before. I just think it's really, really extreme language and I don't like it. That's just my opinion. The indictment, let's see. The indictment against Fazio describes the characteristics of MIE's work. Quote, the amount of work required of him, the availability at all hours, the endless hours, and the psychological abuse were once again part of this new statement. The document states, highlighting a quote from the victim, I was walking down the street thinking I didn't want to live anymore. I was walking down the street thinking how people can smile. That's when they sent me to see a psychiatrist. And see, this is where that like Opus Dei psychiatric medicine situation element starts to come in, and it like continues to pop up so consistently throughout these different experiences that I am reading and hearing about, which is why I have been devoting so much of my like research energy to just looking into this phenomenon and trying to tease apart what it is, what it means, why it's such a consistent through line through all of these stories. And if you are interested in learning more about that, or like looking at what I have put together about this subject, I have a Substack called Bet Griffin and the Deep Dive Project, and I've written 3, and I'm working on the 4th article of a mini series that I am doing, basically just examining this issue right here, the alleged abuse of psychiatric medicine in Opus Dei. And I include different quotes, testimonies, articles, things that I found over the time researching this. Kind of just wanted to put together something a little bit more cohesive. So I know that my webcam has died again, and honestly, guys, I don't think I'm gonna get up and fix it. I think we're just gonna roll with what we've got, and this is just gonna be like a traditional podcast with the news article here. And I am super, super sorry if that's like bumming anybody out, or if that's like not what you were looking for today. I really apologize. I don't know why my webcam is continuing to act up, and I don't want to sink any more time into trying to fix it because we're already live and already rolling, and I just want to keep going. So yes, I will continue to put that little disclaimer out every so often in case new people come in and they're wondering why they can't see me. My webcam is having issues and I cannot figure out what it is on the fly, so we're just gonna roll with what we've got. Let's see here. I do want to make sure that I am still broadcasting. Let's see. Let me pop this off really quick so I can go behind the scenes and look at my... Yep, it looks like I am still rolling. All right, cool. We're gonna keep pressing forward. Let's see. All right, so yes, my webcam is down. I don't have a webcam for this stream. I am very, very sorry about it. Hopefully you treat this as more of like a podcast that you listen to while you are just like getting things done. Hopefully you don't count on seeing my face the entire time, because today I can't give it to you, but it's okay. We're still live. We're still going to get through this. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. And if you need to see my face, I've got a whole channel full of it. You can go and get your kicks after this. So let me go ahead and we'll get through the rest of this article because there are some other good tidbits in here I want to hit, and then we will move on because it's been one article and it's been 30 minutes. So so let's see. So okay, so I concluded that she's talking about this former servant slave of Fazio is describing how she was feeling and how increasingly depressed she became over time, and how that's when they sent her to see a psychiatrist, which is a really interesting, consistent through line in all of these experiences. Prosecutors conclude that the institutional response to the consequences of the life he was facing was antidepressants and sleeping. Oh, life she was facing. See, the translation messes up the gender sometimes with some of these languages. Prosecutors conclude that the institutional response to the consequences of the life she was facing was antidepressants and sleeping pills, both administered by the organization's psychiatrists. So these weren't psychiatrists out in town. These weren't, people that they found in the village. No, these were specifically Opus Dei psychiatrists. On May 14th, the new Pope Leo summoned the highest authorities of the Prelature of the Holy Cross and Opus Dei to his office. Present were the Spaniard Fernando Ocaires, the organization's top leader, and the Argentine Fazio. Judging by the official photos, and there's one right here, he's like holding onto his chair with like a death grip, I think. The audience was friendly, there were smiles. However, it was a meeting in which the new pontiff showed himself willing to follow the path pioneered by Francis, who diminished the power and removed the hierarchy of Opus Dei after the complaint in Argentina and ordered the organization to modify its statutes. Almost 3 years late, the last being after the Argentine's death, just after that audience with Leo, they completed the task and presented them in mid-June. What they don't say here, maybe they do later on, but I'm pretty sure, because this is what I was reading on like Opus Dei Exposed, which is all former members mostly, they were saying that these statutes that they needed to submit almost 3 years late, so they had tried to submit them once before to Pope Francis when he was still alive, and I think Pope Francis kicked them back and said, no, you need to do better. And I've heard that what they are submitting, maybe this is a rumor, so take it with a grain of salt. I haven't independently fact-checked this, but what they're submitting is basically what already got kicked back once before. That was something that I heard. So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, this is now a month ago, and I have not seen anything recent about any movement with this situation. So what's going on, your guess is as good as mine. Now, the big question among circles of former Opus Dei members around the world, as well as others close to the Vatican, is whether Leo will meet again with a man accused of extremely serious crimes, or even further down the line, allow him to remain in his senior position in an institution already under scrutiny. The same question applies to Okyros, who must decide whether to keep Fazio as his deputy. I mean, is it even a question? I mean, for me, it wouldn't be a question, but I also am operating from the perspective that a lot of this stuff, though it may be alleged now, will become a matter of fact, just given the proper due diligence and investigation into it all. So I guess my perspective is probably different. I don't know how Okyros is feeling. It'd be interesting to be a fly on the wall inside his brain. Prosecutors again demanded that Judge Daniel Rafegas conduct the investigations into the accused and highlighted the delay of almost 10 months since the first request on August 20th, 2024. They also highlighted the Argentine state's international obligation to guarantee access to justice for victims of crimes. In a case with the characteristics of the present one, which involves women victims of human trafficking under the form of reduction to servitude within the context of a religious institution, it is necessary to take into special account the duty of due diligence in the judicial investigations that involve them. In turn, the same precedent emphasized that impunity for crimes committed sends the message that violence against women is tolerated, which favors its perpetuation and social acceptance of the phenomenon, fosters the feeling and sensation of insecurity among women, as well as a persistent distrust amongst them in the justice system. In this regard, the prosecutors added that the guarantee of a reasonable time frame requires that criminal proceedings not be unnecessarily delayed, and that investigations and resolutions be carried out without undue delay. Which sounds great to me. So, moving right along, this next article is from Religion Digital. Let me translate it to English. Opus Dei categorically denies the accusations of human trafficking in Argentina and asks that Fazio be able to exercise his right to defense. So this is a direct response to the El Diario article that I just read. Quote, those pushing the accusation have systematically attempted to instill a narrative of automatic guilt in the media, disregarding due process and violating the presumption of innocence of the accused, the OAS emphasizes in response to the prosecution's actions. We believe it is necessary and important that the individuals mentioned in this complaint be able to exercise their right to defense and be allowed to present their version of events for the first time in order to definitively clarify this situation. I mean, that would be great. I definitely don't disagree at all that it is high time that things be definitively clarified in this quote-unquote situation, which really is nothing more than a large and mounting case of human trafficking. Like, let's not beat around the bush here. This is not some like casual misunderstanding. We're talking about a very serious crime. And also bear in mind there are more people enslaved today than at any other point in our history. You can look that up. So this is very, very, very serious. And yes, I think it is time that things were definitively clarified. And if this organization could offer something that felt like definitive clarification on this or any of the other issues that it is contending with, that it is facing, other accusations that are being leveled against it, that would be great. Do I think that's going to happen? I don't know. I would love to be proven wrong. Absolutely. I mean, and also I would imagine if all of this reaches the point of going to an actual trial, going to court, then everybody is going to have an opportunity to present their side of the argument. And then a decision will be reached. And that's how things should work. That is exactly how things should work. And I hope that actually happens. And that's accomplished, because yes, I think it is time. Of course, they're continuing though to categorically deny this accusation of human trafficking and labor exploitation. Of course, that's nothing new. Opus Dei has issued a statement in which it points to a judicial investigation into the personal situation of a woman and attempts to downplay its relevance, despite this being the first time that the prosecutor's office has pointed to the indictment of the auxiliary vicar of Opus Dei and, between 2010 and 2014, regional vicar in Argentina. So it's almost as if and I've noticed this with things that Opus Dei has published. I've noticed they are very selective, or they seem to have a very selective, yeah, they do seem to have a very selective view of the world, and everything seems to happen in a vacuum for them. Everything is isolated, everything is random, everything is just totally shocking. And in this situation with Fazio now being accused, it's just totally shocking. And because it's happening in a vacuum, nobody can understand how in the world it's happening now. How in the world is it happening now? Never mind the fact that there is actually precedent to this, right? And I don't know if there is an acknowledgement of that from Opus Dei in any way, shape, or form. I don't know that I've seen any acknowledgement from Opus Dei of the fact that they are being investigated on very serious charges, that there are real victims, alleged victims, but victims nonetheless, who are prepared to speak out and share what has happened to them, to the tune of 43 different individuals, 44 now if you count Fazio's servant slave girl. So it's not as if this is just so shocking, happening from nowhere. No one can understand why it's happening now. It's because they say the judicial investigation of the personal situation of a woman, completely ignoring everything else that has happened up to now. I don't know. I think that's really interesting. I think it's pretty tone deaf, in my opinion, like everything else that Opus Dei has had to say since this entire thing began. And I would love to see some radical change, and I do think it could potentially be possible, right? Because while we're seeing some very shitty things from some very specific people in this organization, I do have to believe that there are some people in Opus Dei who are just, I mean, I know there are people in Opus Dei who are just normal, kind, good people who just want to live out their faith in a meaningful way, and they feel inspired by what Opus Dei is selling to them. I would love to see people like that push back against this kind of thing and demand some kind of accountability from the hierarchy of this organization. I would think that would be a very positive thing, kind of like a power to the people kind of thing. Let's take back our organization kind of thing, but that's not happening. And I guess we could speculate as to why that is. My speculation is that it has something to do with the whole reason for Opus Dei being in existence in the first place, which is this whole goal of re-Christianization of the world. So there are some things that would just kind of be counter to that, and definitely getting hemmed up for a massive, potentially international human rights violation like this probably is not on their vision board or their to-do list. So again, the denial, the obfuscation, and everything is not shocking, but it's really something to see, especially as things continue to devolve, evolve, however you want to look at it. So this next article is from news site El Ancosti. Opus Dei at the center of a scandal. This is a nice kind of palate cleanser, I think, to the last one. It kind of lays some things out well, I thought, and it's not too long. So this was published July 4th. In a ruling that will surely have implications for the Catholic Church worldwide, Argentine prosecutors formally charged one of the most important figures in the powerful Opus Dei organization and the first in the global line of secession, priest Mariano Fazio, with being part of a system of trafficking poor women for labor exploitation designed and executed by the organization for at least 40 years in Argentina. The judicial investigation indicates at least 43 victims of this system, and the defendants include, in addition to Fazio, 4 other religious figures. This is a severe blow to Opus Dei, a very closed organization founded in 1928 in Spain and linked for decades to the Franco regime. Accused of authoritarian and retrograde practices, since its inception it has spread to many countries and gained influence within the Church to the point that its founder, Jose Maria Escrivá, was canonized in record time in 2002, a decision that many attributed to the political power built up in recent decades. but its influence diminished with the papacy of Francis, who decided to reconfigure the organization's institutional status and cut its powers, undermining its power, which had grown vertiginously during the papacy of John Paul II within the Vatican. That is an awesome word. I don't know that I pronounced it correctly. Vertiginously? That's an awesome word. The prosecutors now conducting the judicial investigation that is cornering Opus Dei in Argentina maintain that the evidence gathered implicates not only Fazio but also other representatives of the organization. The investigation determined that one of the Opus Dei buildings houses a residence for women. The women are actually maids who serve the men in the hierarchy without receiving any payment for their work and in semi-confined conditions. The news site El Diario, which obtained the file, notes that the charges against Fazio describe the characteristics of one of the victim's jobs. Quote, the amount of work required of her, her availability at all hours, the endless hours, and the psychological abuse were all part of her statement, and highlights a statement from the victim, and it's that one that we read before. I was walking down the street thinking I didn't want to live anymore. I was walking down the street thinking how people can smile. Then they sent me to the psychiatrist, who were doctors from the organization itself and who administered antidepressants and sleeping pills to the quote-unquote maids. It is estimated that the Argentine investigation could shed light on the religious organization's allegedly illegal modus operandi in other parts of the world. This is a welcome development. Transparency into the workings of this powerful organization is a breath of fresh air for the entire church, which has yet to recover from the numerous scandals of ecclesiastical sexual abuse unfolding in many countries around the world. Yeah, that's because it ain't over. So anyway, nice little concise update on the entire situation. As of now, there may be a couple other things in here, I can't remember, but that's kind of where things are sitting with the entire situation. And I don't know how long it will be until we start to hear more. All right, so this is from a news site called The Klaxon, News Without Agenda. Okay. July 4th, 2025. Gotta go in with your critical thinking skills engaged, right? To everything that you read. Plus, especially, and I've said this before, you know, it says news without agenda, or they'll try to say news that's unbiased or news that's transparent or whatever. And those are all very good things to strive for, but I think they are inherently kind of ultimately impossible to achieve, especially bias. You can't, I really do not believe that you can completely eliminate bias in any way, shape, or form. It comes into everything that we do, how we interact with and view the world, how we absorb information, how we regurgitate that information back out into the world. Like, that's definitely, I don't think, you know, again, nothing happens in a vacuum, like I said, and you can never completely eliminate that bias. So that's why you can't just let news media do the critical thinking for you and then just expect that you're going to get just the cut and dry facts of it all. That's how it should work, right? But that's really not the reality. And I mean, you can find numerous examples of news media being manipulated, numerous examples throughout history of governments and other foreign and domestic actors using media to promote a specific message or to spread propaganda or whatever. It's happened and will continue to happen probably until the end of time. So you kind of have to go into this with that in mind and keep that in mind with everything that you read. You know, you like to think, and I would like to hope that most of what we're reading is more or less accurate. You know, we're dealing with limited data or limited information in a lot of senses, but you hope that what you're reading is more or less accurate, but you can never fully know. And that's why I always say, you know, don't take what I'm saying and just like run with, just assume that that's it. Don't take what I'm saying as like your one-stop shop for information. Take it and like go and seek out more. Ask questions, dig a little bit deeper. If you're curious about something, do some independent research. I think it's really, really important that we encourage people to do that. And by the way, by doing independent research, I don't mean asking ChatGPT. Okay, I know some people really love ChatGPT, and that's fine. And I think in certain situations it can have its uses. But when I'm talking about critically engaging with information and doing research, again, you cannot have a one-stop shop for anything. You have to cast a wide net. It's fine if you want to have AI in there as a part of it, but don't have that be your only source for information either. That's just as bad as everything else. So anyway, with that said, let's read this news without agenda. Catholic Church caught up in Opus Dei cover-up. So this was published July 4th, Independence Day if you're an American. Written by Anthony Clan. The Catholic Church has made misleading claims about having reported to authorities allegations of abuse made against one of its most senior figures. The Church's powerful Sydney diocese on Tuesday said Bishop Richard Umbers was the subject of a claim of historical abuse and that he had stood aside and that it had notified the relevant authorities. In accordance with its obligations, the Archdiocese has notified the relevant authorities of the complaint, it said in an official statement Tuesday. The NSW police, that's New South Wales, have confirmed there is no active investigation at this time, the church said. Yet the klaxon can exclusively reveal the church has not notified the New South Wales police. NSW police are not aware of this matter, a spokeswoman said. NSW police told the klaxon the church had not notified them or contacted them in any way about the abuse allegations. There was no possibility of there being any investigation because New South Wales police were entirely unaware of the abuse allegations, and of course, Umbers denies them entirely. So New South Wales police have confirmed there's no active investigation at this time. This is from the Sydney Archdiocese. This is their statement they released on July 1st, 2025. In accordance with its obligations, the Archdiocese has notified the relevant authorities of the complaint. The New South Wales police have confirmed there is no active investigation at this time. Given the seriousness of the matter and the church's official statement, the klaxon double-checked with New South Wales police again last night. Has the church contacted NSW police about this matter? No, they have not, a New South Wales police spokesman confirmed. Umbers is Sydney Archdiocese auxiliary bishop, second only to Sydney Archbishop Anthony Fisher. Umbers was appointed auxiliary bishop in 2016 under Archbishop Anthony Fisher and to co-run the governance and pastoral care of the Catholic Archdiocese of Sydney. The Sydney Diocese and Fisher refused to respond to repeated requests for comment. Shocker. The Sydney Diocese Safeguarding and Ministerial Integrity Office and its director, Karen Larkman, also refused to respond to questions from the klaxon. That's not good. Umbers, 54, is a senior member of the Catholic Church's internal hardline group, Opus Dei. Well, look who it is. And is reportedly the first Opus Dei member to become bishop in Australian history. Wow, so that's significant for them. He's the Australian Cipriani, right? Because Cipriani was the first Opus Dei cardinal, and also he's from Peru. And that's a whole interesting, different situation. We've talked about that in the past. I'm not sure if that's going to come up later. We'll see. If not, stay tuned. I will have more on that at some point. But at any rate, this is a very interesting little situation that is very reminiscent, to me, in my opinion, feels very reminiscent of what happened with Cipriani before he was basically told to leave Peru and never return. The law requires serious crimes to be reported to the police, and the policy of the Archdiocese is to report all allegations of sexual abuse to the police, it states. So this is their reporting abuse policy. Here on their website, you can go and look at that in your own time. The Sydney Archdiocese uploaded the statement regarding Umbers to a relatively obscure part of its website on Tuesday. Quote, in conformity to a relatively, I didn't absorb that till after I read it. So they uploaded this statement about this guy's situation to a part of their website that nobody ever visits. That's like a YouTuber, a famous YouTuber, and hoping nobody really sees it there. Crazy. Okay, where am I? So they said that in conformity with their policy, protocol, Bishop Umbers has agreed to stand aside from public ministry. The terse six-sentence statement says the Archdiocese of Sydney has received notice of a civil claim of historical abuse. Auxiliary Bishop Umbers has been identified as the subject of this claim. Bishop Umbers emphatically denies this allegation. Umbers was appointed Auxiliary Bishop of Sydney in June 2016, becoming one of Australia's youngest bishops. Oh my gosh, look at this guy. So not only was he the youngest bishop, but he was also the first Opus Dei Australian bishop. And now also he's apparently an abuser of some sort, allegedly. The St. Paul of the Cross Catholic Primary School in Dulwich Hill in Sydney's Inner West names Umbers as its bishop in residence. That's scary. Tuesday's statement does not appear under the latest news or safeguarding and child protection sections of the church's website. What? Near the bottom of one of 2 pages dedicated to Umber's biography, it states that Umbers is currently on leave. Yikes. Bishop Umbers is currently on leave. Please click here for a statement from the Vicar General. Wow. What is this, 1999? It does not state what the historical abuse allegations are, where the abuse is alleged to have occurred, or when it was alleged to have occurred. Of course not. Of course not. Umbers, a priest of Opus Dei, has worked in multiple church positions in Sydney since 2003. Since 2003, Bishop Richard has worked pastorally as a school and university chaplain at a number of NSW colleges. He was chaplain of Warrain, Redfield College, Creston College, Kenvale College, and the Narana Study Center. So Redfield College, and I think also maybe this study center, both featured in the 2023 ABC Four Corners documentary about the 2 par ed schools in New South Wales, Australia. It's free to watch on YouTube. I think it's called Purity and Education in Opus Dei. And it's about 45-50 minutes long. Very, very well done. You can find it, again, like I said, for free on YouTube. And it's an investigation into these 2 what we would call in the United States private schools in New South Wales, Australia, that have a very strong Opus Dei presence. And unfortunately, some of the things that former alums of these schools have reported experiencing at these schools is pretty concerning, pretty toxic. And really, if you were hoping that sending your child to a religious private school would ensure some type of like excellent and very accurate education, I think I'd be pretty upset if I sent them to one of these and then found out what they'd actually been learning, because it's not scientific or based in fact. Redfield College, and what was the other one? Tangara School for Girls. And I believe this Nirvana Study Center also features, but there is an Opus Dei Study Center that features. Please watch that documentary if you haven't seen it. Please, please, please. It's really good. And I think based on what I know about Opus Dei and just how like uniform everything that it does, regardless of region or country, I think we can make some pretty safe assumptions about what is probably happening. Maybe, potentially, I don't know, I wasn't there, but potentially in other Opus Dei schools around the world. And if it's anything like what former alums of these 2 schools in New South Wales, Australia have reported, fucking yikes. So they say that Redfield College, like I said, is an independent Roman Catholic all-boys school in Sydney's outer Northwest Hills District. The Nirvana Study Center, which is also in the Hills District, is an educational center helping boys and young men to grow in character, competency, maturity, and concern for others. If by concern for others they mean invasive questions about people's private lives that are nobody's business, then I guess yes, they'd be correct. The center is operated by the Opus Dei Prelature, and its activities are inspired by the teachings of St. Jose Maria Escriva, founder of Opus Dei, it states. Opus Dei, officially called the Prelature of the Holy Cross, and Opus Dei is a small but powerful organization within the Catholic Church. We know they abide by strict conservative teachings. It's been described as a church within a church, and they say more to come. So if you'd be interested in supporting this journalistic venture here at the Claxon, you can go and find this article linked in the source document below. And I will continue. I'm going to continue, and I think there are a few other things in here about this situation. I'm going to continue to kind of keep an eye on it, just because, again, like I said, is this 1999? I mean, this situation should not even happened. If all of the, harping and crying about safety protocols and everything for children we were led, people were led to believe that was going to work and that was going to actually protect people. And here we see none of that stuff. It's all been very allegedly cleanly circumvented. At least that's how it looks in this situation. If the reporting is to be believed, I have no reason not to believe it, just because of it sounds so standard. It sounds so par for course. It sounds like every single other report of abuse that I have heard from a religious organization. Honestly, none of them seem to be very good at taking accountability, and that's really, really concerning, especially when people are continuing to put their children in close proximity to these organizations and institutions. Moving right along. Millier's ideologue in the filed complaint of sexual abuse against his daughter. So we're switching gears, going back to the Spanish-speaking world. Journalist and writer Ivy Cangaro spoke on the radio program The Worst Is Over and revealed previously unknown details of a legal case involving Nicolas Marquez, the president's chief ideological advisor. The complaint, filed by his daughter's mother in 2008, was dismissed without him being summoned to testify. And this is Javier Millier, and I guess this is Nicolas Marquez. This weekend, journalist Ivy Cangaro gave an extensive interview on the SRT media program The Worst Is Over, where she delved into her investigation, published on dataclave.com.ar under the title Millier's Monster, Nicolas Marquez and the Pedophilia Allegation That Brought Him to Justice. The article delves into the judicial past of one of the most influential men in President Javier Millier's inner circle. Marquez, a lawyer, writer, and the president's principal speechwriter, is known for his role in the so-called cultural battle and his ultra-conservative narrative. But according to Cangaro, in 2008, he was accused of sexually abusing his 3.5-year-old daughter. And bear in mind, according to recent stats that I read, children only make up these types of allegations. Children only lie about this type of thing, something like 2 to 4% of the time. Okay, so the odds that something like this is not true are not in this guy's favor. I'm not saying it is true. I'm just saying statistically, that's what I'm led to believe. Because children are overwhelmingly honest when it comes to this kind of thing. And the fact that they are continually disbelieved when they're honest about that kind of thing is truly something that makes me see red. So the complaint was filed by the girl's mother and supported by a wide network of professional witnesses, pediatricians, psychologists, teachers, and family members. So this wasn't just somebody flapping their gums out in the street. I accessed the entire file. I read it all. What I found was horrifying. There are drawings, videos, and testimonies that were never considered by the courts, Cangaro admitted in the interview. The case was dismissed a week later by prosecutor Andrea Gomez without even taking any forensic examinations or statements from the accused. There wasn't even a Giselle chamber for the minor. The case was closed without any investigation, she complained. It wasn't a lack of evidence, but rather a deliberate decision not to investigate. There are dozens of spontaneous testimonies completely ignored by the prosecution. According to the investigation, Nicolas Marquez used his current connections within the Mar del Plata judiciary and his membership in Opus Dei to protect himself. He wasn't as powerful as he is today, but he already knew how to navigate the system, the author explained. In addition to the child abuse allegation, the case file includes episodes of gender-based violence and recent instances of public assault. Cangaro noted that even Marquez's friends and acquaintances without a filter, whom many prefer to avoid. Consequently, Marquez has no connection with his daughter. After 4 years of unsuccessful reconnection supervised by a psychologist, it was concluded that he did not understand his role as a father and that he used contact with a child as a means of harming the mother. It was Marquez who wrote Millier's speech at the Davos Forum, in which he linked homosexuality with pedophilia. In his public appearances, he continues to spread misogynistic and homophobic rhetoric. This case not only portrays Marquez, but also the system that covered him up, Cangaro described. The full article can be read here at this link if you would like to, and you can access that in the source document below. Millier has connections to Opus Dei. I've read about them in the past, although I don't know that they've come up in a newsroom analysis just yet, but he does. They're there. And then I don't know if this guy does. Just because he is ultra conservative does not mean that he is also automatically Opus Dei, right? But it is, it's kind of like saying, it's not kind of like saying not all conservative, ultra conservative people are in Opus Dei, but all Opus Dei people are ultra conservative. So who knows? I haven't looked into him, but I wanted to read this, throw it out there on the radar, just because of the context, because of what we're talking about, because of the connections that these people have. I think it's worth highlighting. I'm going to take a look at the chat real quick. Hi, Ian. I'm glad you got your headphones fixed. Yeah, I hope the audio continues to work. Normally I have really good luck with audio. Video seems to be my big hang up, and my big issue. If you're joining this a little bit later and you're wondering why I'm not on screen, I'm just having issues with my webcam today, and we're just gonna roll without the webcam. I'll get up and turn it back on before I close out and everything, but for the duration of the article reading, I'm just not gonna worry about it because it keeps cutting out. Peggy said, Opus Dei members are in all governments. I mean, there certainly seems to be like it's very consistent. Like you kind of find one or two in every single like strata level of society and education and government and everything. Like it's a little bit too consistent to think that it's just pure happenstance, in my opinion. I mean, it's too cohesive. Glenn asked, does Opus Dei have their own Seven Mountains theory? I don't know if they do or not, but it wouldn't surprise me, something kind of similar to it. The Seven Mountains thing is an evangelical thing. But also it's important to remember, although I have not researched the Seven Mountains theory as much, I've kind of just encountered it in passing because of what I'm doing here. But Opus Dei is an organization that has Spanish roots. I would also argue that there are fascist elements at play there because of the fact that the organization came up through Franco's Spain, and benefited from a relationship with Franco's government. That's something that is reported in Gareth Gore's book Opus, and you can also find articles and things about it online if you want to research that more on your own. But the Seven Mountains thing, if I'm not mistaken, is like mainly evangelical North American. But if there are also influences from other countries, for sure, let me know. Whether or not Opus Dei has something like that, I don't know. But I mean, the entire reason behind Jose Maria Escriva creating Opus Dei and having this holy mission, it was to re-Christianize the world. I mean, that's discussed very, very prominently in numerous places. They want to re-Christianize the world, and that is a very specific slant of Christianity, right? It's a very specific flavor. It's an Opus Dei flavor. But that's definitely an element that's at play, and maybe you could consider that their like seven mountains thing. But I don't know if it's like, I don't know how well developed that plan is, right? I don't know how well organized that plan is, and that kind of comes back down to my like overarching conversation that I've kind of had over time, my kind of evolving understanding of this organization, Opus Dei, and like how it works and everything. I've kind of come to the conclusion, just because of what I know from my research and everything, that it's, I mean, Jose Maria Escriva always described it as a disorganized organization, and I really do believe that that is true. I don't believe that it's operating like this well-oiled machine or like this militia. It's more disorganized than that. But within that disorganization, Opus Dei has a very, like I've said, a very strong flavor of Christianity, a very specific slant. It was Jose Maria Escriva's vision and perspective on the world, and that has continued to filter down and remain like a constant through line within the organization to this day. I mean, despite the fact that Opus Dei is turning 100 years old, despite the fact that the founder passed away decades ago, that element is still alive and well. And I think the reason for that is likely because of this, cult of personality that people have described inside Opus Dei around Jose Maria Escriva. This was his baby, this was his vision, this was his thing, and he created his own like oyster basically for that, his own little world where he could work. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. I don't know that there is a well-developed idea of how to carry that re-Christianization out, or if it's more ideological than that. I'm not sure, and I'd be open to having a conversation about that, because my mind is not made up yet. So this is from bishopaccountability.org, but I'm looking here. So this is about this same New South Wales situation that we read about just a minute ago. Bishop Accountability doesn't always publish, or maybe doesn't ever publish its own like original stuff. It basically is like a database of stories like this about bishops and clergy that are in trouble. And I'm looking through here, and it looks like this is just like another, they copy pasted basically the Claxon article, and they even accredited it to him at the bottom and everything. So I'm not going to read this again because we just did, and there's another one after this. Okay, so this is another article. So this was originally from The Pillar. I saved this article for whatever reason. Honestly, I like the layout, the format on bishopaccountability.org, because it's just a page, and like they'll have images if it's relevant, like they did on the last one, but like it's not crazy. You're not having to like fight your way through pop-ups just to read what it has to say. So I kind of like that, and I'll save that over the original article. This original article is from The Pillar. Again, from July 4th, Bishop Umber steps aside while denying abuse claim. He emphatically denies the allegation. It says a prominent Australian bishop has agreed to step aside from ministry and an investigation into a historical claim of abuse, which he has strongly denied. The Archdiocese of Sydney said July 1st that it had received a notice of a civil claim of historical abuse, which he had strongly denied. The Archdiocese of Sydney said, notice of historical abuse, identified as the claimed subject. So Richard Umber, subject of historical claim of abuse, he emphatically denies the allegation, the Archdiocese said, adding it had notified the authorities about the complaint, but as we read a moment ago, that seems dubious. The Archdiocese noted that the New South Wales Police Force, which is responsible for law enforcement in Sydney, had confirmed there was no active investigation into the allegation. So what happened? If they reported it, why was no investigation opened? But then they were also saying that they were never told. So that's what I'm saying, like, this thing does not add up. In conformity with the Archdiocesan Protocol for Managing Safeguarding Complaints and relevant legislation, Bishop Umbers has agreed to stand aside from public ministry while this allegation is investigated. So, member of Opus Dei, was appointed as Sydney auxiliary bishop in 2016. And apparently is known throughout the English-speaking world for his online presence, which has earned the 54-year-old nickname the Meme Bishop. See, and that was going to be my next question, because do you remember the previous article, the first article that we read from the Claxon, and it had that picture of Umbers like cheesing in the article, and it's saying here that he's like renowned for his online presence and is known as the Meme Bishop, has this like really cute little nickname. This is something that I've kind of noticed, and I don't know that this may happen just within the Catholic Church in general, or within like different communities, this kind of just happens, I guess. But I don't know, within a religious context, the whole idea of like celebrity is such a huge turnoff to me. Like, there are several Catholic religious members who are very well known on social media, who have very successful YouTube channels or podcasts. I'm thinking of like Father Mike Schmidt, for example, is one that immediately comes to mind. I've had him pop up in my algorithm before. Who's another one? Father Ripperger, although I don't know that he's as like popular as he used to be, but he was definitely a big one back in the day. And then you've got like this guy here, and I guess it's not just Opus Dei that does this, but it's something within maybe the Catholic Church, or like I said, maybe all religions turn religious figures, leaders into celebrities to an extent. But I've noticed, like with Opus Dei people specifically, the articles that will write about them as they're like assuming these positions of authority within these different countries. Like I'm thinking of the new bishop in Iceland, who's like an Opus Dei guy who's trying to like create this community and dealing with a very undeniably very challenging set of circumstances there, because um, Iceland is a small country with a very tiny Catholic population. They don't even have like their own churches or anything like that. They like borrow churches from like the Lutherans and stuff so that they can have their services and everything. But like in articles I've read about him, now this guy and another one that I'm not remembering off the top of my head, they'll like turn these people kind of into celebrities and go to great lengths to talk about like how normal or funny or relatable or cool they are. Like this bishop in Iceland specifically, he's written a book about like going ice fishing and like doing like the Wim Hof ice bath thing, and like being like kind of like they're trying to make him out to be like this sort of rugged outdoorsman a little bit. And then you have this Umbers guy here who was, what did it say in the last article, the first Opus Dei Australian Opus Dei bishop. And now they're saying that he was known for his online presence because he was just so popular and he's this meme bishop and it's so funny and ha ha ha. Like, I don't know, something about all of that, it just really smells off to me. Like the whole like, I don't know, it's like the whole parasocial relationship of it all, or like the way that the links that they are going to make these people seem like cool and interesting, when at their core they're just religious leaders. Like they're just religious people who are supposed to be leading other people in their like religious observances. Like that's it. But you got to go to all these extra links, it seems, and I just find that really interesting, and it's something that I've noticed and I wanted to mention it. So it looks like this is repeating a lot of the same information that the last article mentioned, like where when he joined the priesthood, it says he studied the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross. He was ordained in 2002, like that last article said. I'm looking to see if there's anything else about the specific charges. So it says here that following his episcopal ordination in 2016, he represented Australia and New Zealand's bishops at the International Eucharistic Congresses in Budapest in 2021 and Quito in 2024. He was granted Australian citizenship in April 2024, because it said back here he was born in New Zealand. Let's see. When the criminal investigation, this is about somebody else, so they're drawing parallels. It says that in 2021, Bishop John Brungart, the Bishop of Dodge City, Kansas, took a voluntary leave of absence while the Kansas Bureau of Investigation said it was looking into an abuse allegation against him. Brungart's decision to step away largely broke with Episcopal precedent, as several U.S. bishops had chosen previously to remain in active ministry while the Vatican conducted probes into allegations of sexual or administrative conduct. That's interesting. When the criminal investigation against Brunhart was announced, Archbishop Joseph Naumann was directed by the Vatican's doctrinal dicastery to oversee a canonical probe under Vos Estis Lux Mundi, the policy issued by Pope Francis in 2019 for investigating alleged abuse or administrative misconduct on the part of bishops. Says that if the body concludes there is a reasonable likelihood that the applicant is eligible for redress, it can offer the applicant counseling or direct response from an institution, such as a church or school, and a payment. The National Redress Scheme can provide a maximum redress payment of 150,000 Australian dollars, which is around 98,000 US dollars. The abuse crisis in the Catholic Church in Australia has included high-profile legal cases, and they mention a couple of those here. Cardinal George Pell, retired Bishop Christopher Saunders, George Pell was also connected to Opus Dei, and I talked about him, gosh, a long time ago now, whenever I did my episode video about Opus Dei's relationship with the Vatican specifically. He ended up coming up, and there were some interesting things about that. All right, moving right along. So this is from a Spanish news site published July 9th, how reactionary Catholics infiltrated the French government. So work with me here with the translation. It may not be perfect, but this is interesting, and I wanted to include it. This is a story of an infiltration. The story of a political project hidden behind incense, cassocks, and a patiently developed strategy. According to an explosive investigation published by Mediapart under the presidency of Nicolas Sarkozy, an ultra-conservative circle close to Opus Dei in the Vatican exerted a direct influence on the political choices of the French state. A discreet but formidably organized entryist operation led by an identitarian Catholic right determined to influence the direction of the Republic. A revelation that challenges prevailing narratives. While the threat of Islamist infiltration, particularly that of the Muslim Brotherhood, is constantly being brandished at us, this investigation reveals a completely different face of religious influence in France and a different terrain of power penetration. To discuss this, Anton Roger, journalist at Mediapart and co-author of the investigation, is the guest of the Contre Matinale. I can't speak French, so I'm sorry. Probably mispronouncing that horribly. Wanted to throw that in there just because I don't see a lot of news media from France specifically in regard to Opus Dei, even though one of the most significant court cases involving Opus Dei played out in French court between Catherine Tissier and 99 other former domestic workers and Opus Dei, the organization itself, and also leadership within that country. This was it concluded in 2016, although initial litigation and everything began in like 2011 or something like that. And it's a really, really interesting case because, well, for one thing, initially, Opus Dei was acquitted or, was basically whatever the legal jargon is for let off the hook. Essentially, they were not held responsible, and so they tried again. Catherine Tissier and her legal team tried again, and in 2016 they were able to bring, I guess, new information, represent other findings that they had, and they were able to actually win the court case. And it's significant because Opus Dei has been very singularly skilled at avoiding litigation on an organizational scale. By that I mean, avoiding being sued as Opus Dei TM. The way that they do that is by passing off responsibility to these quote-unquote corporate works that Opus Dei members allegedly just start up to do out of their own volition. And this also ties into what I was saying about how Opus Dei inserts itself into every single strata of society, So you have these quote-unquote corporate works that are in education, they're in media, they're in entertainment, they're in government, they're in literally everything. And that is how, in my view, from what I've seen, this organization is able to move in and influence things. It's very, you kind of got to respect the hustle, honestly, and it's pretty smart because it's worked. And not only has it worked, they've also been able to use these corporate works to pass off any blame for anything legal that might happen, saying, oh, well, it wasn't our organization, it was actually this corporate work. And yes, the corporate work is run by people who may be affiliated with Opus Dei, but they're not in any way representing our organization in that corporate work. Therefore, we have no responsibility for the things that happen. That's usually, to some extent or another, how things play out. And in 2016 in France, the jig was up for them that time, and they weren't able to do it. And so the organization ended up having to pay fines because it was proven that they actually had trafficked this woman, not paid her for the labor that she had done, and also exposed her to some really abusive conditions. And so if you want to learn more about that case, again, because it is very important, I've had a couple of standalone episodes about it. Now, I think if you went and Googled it, you could probably pull up Reddit posts and things that have been written about it. There's been a little bit more in the last couple of years. But that case was more or less forgotten until really just a few years ago when I became aware of it, and somebody on the Opus Dei exposed community unearthed it and shared it on that Reddit community. But like stuff like that happens, and it's and then again, and this is another reason for why I sit here and read these things. Maybe if somebody had been reading through articles back when that stuff had been happening with Catherine, something would have been caught, something would have been noticed, and the situation could have been used as a learning opportunity instead of just getting shoved under the rug like it ultimately was. Although Catherine did win, so that is good. And then in the theme of people taking back charge of their lives and winning and being good, this is from the Irish Times. Cork woman recruited to Opus Dei at age 15, quote, "I don't think I've ever come to terms with the enormity of what happened to me." This is about Anne-Marie Allen and her new book, which I referenced earlier, Serve My Last Years in the Heart of Opus Dei, of Ireland's Opus Dei. This was published on July 11th, and it's about an interview. And I believe the interview, yes, you can listen to it here. So if you would like to listen to it, I definitely recommend it. It's very good. I listened to it. You can find it down in the source document below, but I'll read what the article has to say. When Anne-Marie Allen was 15, she was accepted into a catering college with dreams of becoming a chef. Instead, she was tricked into a life of domestic servitude with Opus Dei, an institution of the Catholic Church that was founded in Spain in 1928 by Jose Maria Escriva. Allen worked part-time in a local hotel in Ballyvourney, County Cork, when two women arrived to her family home, saying that they were interviewing for a free catering course. The women said that Allen could receive pocket money of £5 a week and a job guaranteed by the end of the 2-year course. This meeting began the 6-year-long ordeal chronicled in Allen's memoir. In this episode of the Woman's Podcast, the Cork author discusses her experience. After a few weeks, Allen began to notice there didn't seem to be any catering teachers there. There were only members of Opus Dei. These members of Opus Dei were known as the local council, the directors, the subdirectors, and the secretary, but none of them seemed to have qualifications in catering, adds Allen. As a teenager, she cooked, served, ironed, washed, scrubbed for the members of Opus Dei. Not long after I joined, maybe a couple of months, I was called up into the director's bedroom, and she gave me this little bag, and I opened it up, and there was a chain, a kind of barbed wire with 2 cords in it and a whip. She said, "These are for mortification," recalls Allen. Allen said she was told to wear the chain on her leg for 2 hours every day, and on occasion for an extra hour a day depending on behavior. The whip was used on your back, your legs, or your bum. There were other mortifications as well, says Allen, including but not limited to sleeping on the floor without a mattress, sleeping without a pillow, and cold showers. They were obsessed with the idea of temptation and sin, the occasion of sin, she says. However, the chain and whip were nothing in comparison to fraternal correction. Fraternal correction, as it was marketed to us, was a way of helping us improve our spiritual life and how to become more aligned to the perfect member of Opus Dei. But what it was a form of behavior control. Fraternal corrections were verbal reprimands from your peers based on conduct. You were only supposed to get 1 a week, but I remember getting 2 a day. Although Allen says she is in a good place now, she says she will always be recovering from her time in Opus Dei. "I don't think I've ever come to terms with the enormity of what happened to me and what happened to all of us. I know. I don't think I'll ever get over it. I will never stop fighting to correct it." You can listen back to this conversation in the player above or wherever you get your podcasts. And again, if you have the opportunity and you can buy her book or request it from your library, interlibrary loan or something like that, please do. It's a really, really excellent book. And I also thought it was very readable. I thought, for example, just to contrast it with another piece of literature similar, Gareth Gore's Opus is also a very good book, but it's a different kind of book. It's much more research heavy. There's footnotes and annotations, and it goes very in depth into the history and the whys and the wherefores behind all of these different elements that contribute to the story, the narrative that Gareth Gore was telling with that book. Serve is a very good book, but it's good for a different reason. It's good because it is a first-person narrative of a lived experience within a part of the Opus Dei world that is very, very difficult for someone who has never been in Opus Dei, or even somebody who has but has never been an assistant numerary, to understand. It's a very unique thing that you really got to take your time working through, and the book Serve does a perfect job of bringing the reader into that world, introducing them to the conditions that Anna Maria was kind of thrown into, and describing the impact that that had on Anna Marie's life. And that's something that, as the reader, and I mean, unless you're just an unfeeling rock, but as a reader, I was feeling her frustration and her anger and her sadness and all of these other difficult emotions and things that she was grappling with while she was going through this really difficult experience. And it's incredibly powerful. So please read the book if you can. And like I said, I'll have more to say on it in the future too. So this is an opinion piece from HuffPost, from the Spanish site, published on July 11th. Viejo, and I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I also don't really care, and the destruction of the system. This was an interesting article on politics in government, and I wanted to read it because it has some interesting things to say. The repugnant accusation that Viejo is, in an outrageous and low-class tone, made against his opponent in a recent parliamentary session regarding possible involvement in the president's political relatives and long-standing business dealings in Madrid's underworld have not been proven, and in any case, if they prove to be even partially true, they would not generate any moral or material liability for the current head of the executive, who is completely unrelated to those hypothetical events. But the most serious aspect of this repulsive affair, which the eternal right, the one that believes that God guarantees it hegemony by divine right forever and ever, has brought bathed in bile to the stage of pluralism, is that the circulating material obtained during Rajoy's time from the most contaminated wells of the system was apparently compiled by a subject named Villarejo, a corrupt police officer who lived off extortion and blackmail, in a civil kingdom organized by the Opus Dei minister Fernandez Diaz, who allegedly created not one but several parallel police forces, which were used, among other things, to fan the flames of Catalan sovereignty by harassing its members and to discredit Pablo Iglesias' emerging force, Podemos, with a series of slanders as serious as they were utterly false. That era is still alive in the courts, and although we Democrats have little faith in the conventional justice system, the then Secretary of State for Security, Francisco Martinez, is in prison, prosecuted by Judge Maria Tardon of the National Court, for the moment only for strange connections with computer hackers, but with other open cases. The dirty war against Podemos, organized within the Ministry of the Interior itself, is also being investigated by the National Assembly, led by Judge Santiago Pedraz. In other words, the savage police corruption of the Rajoy era, which not only failed to control his governments but also his security forces, has left as a byproduct a mass of dubious, if not custom-made, information that ultimately seeks to destroy the system. What good does this shabby right do with a democratic regime that has the audacity to prefer progressive organizations at the polls, and that, in its almost half-century of rule, has only granted power to the People's Party less than a third of the time? The intellectual misappropriation of democracy, perpetrated first by Aznar and then by Rajoy, has been exploited by Vox, a far-right party that inherited Franco's impudence and that, deep down, laughs at its fellow traveler from the People's Party because, despite its tricks, it has obtained very little loot. That's why Viejo, desperate for the strength of a world he doesn't understand, that of political progressivism, has decided to put all his eggs in one basket, and to finally ensure his hegemony? I had to look up that word for a video, and I mispronounced it in that video, and I'm probably mispronouncing it now, and I'm sorry. He's no longer just demanding new elections, which he could lose. There are never any certainties in electoral counts. Now he demands that Pedro Sanchez end up in jail. That the why is the least of it. Such an attack, which is based, it's worth emphasizing, on distant rumors whose insinuations were already circulating in 2014 when Sanchez had to confront Eduardo Medina in the primaries, which had no legal relevance and violates all the rules of civility and fair play that the parliamentary model cannot ignore, implicitly implies that, to achieve their objectives, reactionary parties will force the situation to whatever extent necessary. In its own way, the PP is writing the equivalent of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, no longer anti-Semitic but anti-Sanchista. Although, like Hitler in his time with those fabrications, everyone knows that this story is a farce, a colossal lie. Well then, those who embrace Fiejo's well speech should take heed, because if the right insists on destroying the system, on making the regime uninhabitable, on taking this country to places of pathological exceptionalism, those of us who maintain our unwavering support for the constitutional regime will not stand idly by. We know that there are allegedly a handful of judges who, without the slightest respect for ethics or aesthetics, have joined the cause of deconstruction, but it is evident that a clear majority of judges, conservative or progressive, are willing to make any sacrifice, even heroically, to uphold the rule of law. And civil society, which has given sufficient proof of maturity over time, will not be intimidated by the effervescence of a plot hatched by mediocre figures who, deep down, lack the stature to even aspire to prominent positions that were conceived for politicians of true stature. Now, take out all of the proper nouns. Take out all of the geographical references, because this is talking about a political situation in a different country's government, right? But take all of those things out. And does this not read like something that you would read here in the United States? Does this not read like something that you would read in the UK? What is happening in our world right now? Like I said at the beginning, and I'm going to continue to say it now and forever, we do not live in a vacuum. Nothing is happening on an island, isolated away from everything else. Everything is connected. Everything is attached to everything else. And collectively, I think when you look at the stories and the narratives and the information being published right now, it's impossible to deny that there's a collective experience that we're all having right now. And I don't know ultimately where that leads us, but, you know, at the end of this article here, it says something. It says civil society has given sufficient proof of maturity over time and will not be intimidated by the effervescence of a plot hatched by mediocre figures. And I think that is a sentiment that, even though this is an article pertaining to Spanish society, it could also apply here in the United States as well, or in Brazil or Mexico or Canada, or, you know, pick a place, because I think in general there is a growing sense of dissatisfaction that we all are feeling with these institutions that are supposed to be running the world and taking care of business so that we can all live happy, safe lives. There's a growing dissatisfaction with how that has been abused, and people, I think, are just sick and tired of it. They've had enough and they're not interested in playing anymore. And you see that reflected in news media from, you know, countries on across the ocean. And I think that's really interesting. So I wanted to highlight that because, again, while this is about a very specific situation happening in Spain, take out everything proper noun and it could be happening anywhere. And I think it's important to remember that we're not going through this alone. Like I say, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. So this next article, Spain's far right say they're rebels, but the establishment already accepted them. So I pulled this up not because this came up. This was published in 2023, as you see. It didn't come up in my inbox, but I was just doing some extra research on the Vox party in Spain and what is like driving this thing and what it is. And I found this article here, and it's pretty interesting. I don't know if I'm going to read all of it. But there are some interesting points that I wanted to kind of pull out, and I think it's good to be aware of this movement in Spain because it is similar to things that are happening other places, i.e. here in the United States or elsewhere. It says a decade ago, Spain was often cited as a rare European country without far-right MPs, but polls for Sunday's election, remember this was back in 2023, suggest the Franco-nostalgic Vox party is about to enter national government after years building its influence over mainstream conservatives. The time for patriots has arrived. Italian Premier Giorgia Meloni told supporters of the nationalist Vox Party ahead of the general election in Spain this Sunday. In a speech delivered remotely from Rome to a packed rally in Valencia, the leader of the post-fascist Fratelli d'Italia party framed Sunday's vote as one that could change the direction of European politics, fundamentally altering the balance of power on the continent. In Italy, as in Finland, Sweden, Poland, and the Czech Republic, we have shown that patriots can govern, she claimed, referring to other parties in her continent-wide European conservatives and reformists ECR alliance that have won high office in recent times. Now, she said, it is crucial that on July 23rd, a conservative patriotic alternative is established in Spain. Final polling before Sunday's vote suggests a government along such lines is indeed the most likely outcome. The combined vote share of the conservative Partido Popular and Vox is predicted to reach between 46 and 48%, a historic high for the Spanish right, putting the two parties on the brink of an absolute majority. El Pais's final poll has them 3 seats short, with PP leading the center-left, Socialists 32.9% to 28.7%, and Vox tying the left-wing Sumar party at around 13.5%. Given such an outcome, the right-wing bloc would probably be able to count on the support of a small number of regional MPs to secure a thin majority. It says, in this polarized atmosphere, the left has struggled to respond. Sanchez has sought to sound the anti-fascist alarm and position the PSOE as a tactical vote for all progressives fearful of what is to come. But according to political analyst Diego Moreno, the strategy has ensnared Sanchez's campaign in a reactive logic under which the PSOE has been unable to go beyond simply responding to the provocations of the right, whether around the removal of pride flags from public buildings or Vox's denial of gender violence. A further major unknown is the level of mobilization on the radical left and whether Deputy Prime Minister Yolanda Diaz can put months of damaging infighting behind her and lead a late comeback. Now, all of this is, of course, retrospective, so we can look at current events and see how things have kind of played out. But there's something in here specifically. So there's some caveats. Let's see. Where do I want to jump in here at? The extreme right has imposed its agenda on the public arena, but the resulting toxic atmosphere seems to have benefited the PP more, with Vox having lost ground in the polls over the last year. She sees the boundary, this co-president of the left-wing think tank Transform Europe, sees the boundary between the two parties as ever more vague and permeable, not least because the true leader of the far right in Spain, the person who has done most to impose its narratives, is the PP's Trumpian Madrid governor Isabel Díaz Ayuso. This vague boundary, however, also reflects the fact that unlike most other far-right parties in Europe, which have emerged at a distance from mainstream conservatism, Vox was founded as a splinter from the PP. Its leader, Santiago Abascal, was a regional MP for the PP in the Basque Country until he split from the party in 2013. According to Ferre, extreme right elements have always operated within the PP, particularly through its strong ties to ultra-conservative Catholic sects like Opus Dei and Los Chicos, though their influence was diluted within the PP's broader conservative project for middle-class Spain. So that was mainly what I wanted to get to, the driving point that I was getting at, the fact that there is a religious element in this Vox party that is kind of moving through and influencing things. And it's interesting to read. I mean, this was published in, like I said, 2013. The headline, the Spain's far right say they're rebels, but the establishment's already accepted them. Looking at that now, retroactively 3 years later, it feels like a self-fulfilled prophecy in a lot of ways. It came true. So, the ghost of Francis appeared to Pope Leo upon his first arrival at Castel Gandolfo. So, this article talks about what is heavy on everyone's minds, which is, what is the new pope going to do with Francis's outstanding business, basically, that he left undone whenever he passed away. And Pope Leo went to this Castel Gandolfo, which is some sort of like vacation place where he can chill out, I guess. And it says that, let's see, while Leo has returned for a couple of weeks of active rest, Francis never went on vacation. The movements of the right-wing sectors of the Vatican are trying to resume some of the points that seemed closed by Bergoglio: the scourge of abuse, the condemnations of Cardinal Becciu, I don't know how to pronounce that name, the end of Latin masses, or the blessings of gay couples, things that are having Catholics pressed. On that list is the alleged presentation of Opus Dei, which is something that I am definitely paying attention to, of a proposed statute for the prelature, the same one that Francis shot down months ago. The example of the work is paradigmatic for understanding the movements of some sectors who believe that the arrival of the new pope represents a clean slate for the church. They act as if Francis never existed, and they don't know Prevost, a close collaborator of the pontiff, notes in conversation with Diario. In any case, the pressure began shortly after the start of Leo's papacy, and along with the future of Opus Dei came the publication of a supposed report that claimed to reveal how Francis scorned the requests of many bishops to avoid restrictions on Latin masses. A report that Holy See spokesman Matteo Bruni described as a very partial and incomplete reconstruction of the decision-making process. The leak, originating from traditionalist sectors of the Curia, aims to pressure Leo to reverse his predecessor's decision. So the pressures are mounting, and what they're talking about here is, if you're not Catholic and you're like, what's going on? Back in the day, pre like the 1960s, Mass was always said in Latin, and that was a traditional way that it was done and had been done for hundreds of years. And then in the 1960s, there was an event called Vatican II, which was basically a big meeting in the church, and they changed some things and revamped some things, and they introduced what is known as the Trinity, or the Novus Ordo Rite, which is the new the new order of the Mass, and that meant the Mass was all like in English or in your language of origin, and some of the prayers changed, and like in the Latin Mass and the Tridentine Rite, as it was known, the priest was facing the altar and away from the people, and in the Novus Ordo Rite, he's facing the people, and like things like that changed. There's a very distinct divide between pre and post Vatican II times, and one of the most contentious, there's been a lot of things about Vatican II that were contentious that more conservative sectors of the church have not been in favor of, but one of those has been what they mention here, these restrictions on Latin masses, which was basically, I believe, the Vatican said that all churches need to be saying the same type of Mass, and it can't be the Latin Mass because that's part of Vatican II. And so now that has been challenged, and they're trying to challenge it because these conservative parts of the church would obviously prefer to keep things as they were, and one of the things that they liked as it was the Mass being in Latin with all the smells and bells. A Latin Mass is a very different experience than a Novus Ordo and normal ordinary Mass. It's a very, very different vibe. And growing up, we did go to Latin Mass parishes every once in a while, and I did like the ceremony, and I did like the Latin, and I liked the smells and the bells and the ceremony of it all, and it did feel like a much more serious ceremony than some of the Novus Ordo churches that I had been to previously and after that. So I get the appeal that people have to it, but there's a reason why Francis was trying to get this to the whole Latin Mass thing to kind of go the way of the dodo bird. And I don't necessarily think, and again, take this with a grain of salt, this is just my opinion, but from the outside looking in, it didn't really seem to me that it was something that was being done because Francis had a vendetta against Latin or against like the traditional rite of the Mass or anything like that. There were other reasons for trying to get everybody on the same page, other bigger, more important reasons, and this was just one of those things that, like, if we're going to get everybody on the same page, everybody needs to be on the same page about this, and that became one of the things that people freaked out about and has been a real point of contention ever since. And you had bishops being declared schismatic when Francis was still alive for saying that they weren't going to support what Francis was wanting the church to do and blah, blah, blah. It's a whole messy thing, really. It really is, as is most of church history when you really get down to it. But let me scroll through here and see if there's anything else they had to say about Opus Dei specifically, because there are a lot of other things going on. And while they are important, to be perfectly honest, I don't necessarily care about them. So let me see. It looks like just Vatican intrigue and Vatican Vatican gossip, honestly. So if you'd like to read through that more in depth on your own time, you can find it down below. But I'm going to keep moving forward. Let's see. This is another article from El Diario. The Catholic fascist sphere returns with the Francoist flag included. Ooh, Francoist flag included. Say that 5 times fast. 2 of Toledo's ultra-Catholic priests have resurrected the La Sacristia de la Vendée canal, which was closed a month ago after wishing for the death of Pope Francis, praising Franco as a savior of the Spanish church from extermination, and calling for a bomb to be detonated in the Vatican. Boy. Exactly a month ago, the ultra-right priests who ran La Sacristia de la Vendée announced the voluntary suspension of their counter-revolutionary Catholic gathering, during which they went so far as to wish for the death of Pope Francis, praised Franco as a savior of the Spanish church, even called for a bomb to detonate the Vatican. We are suspending all programs until further notice, said the priests who had been warned by their bishops and threatened with canonical sanctions. Although, as El Diario has been able to confirm, they are banned from re-airing their controversial sacristia, they believe they found a way to return, even if only halfway. Thus, on March 28th, in the midst of Holy Week, 2 of the priest members of the clan, Francisco J. Delgado and Gabriel Calvo, published a video interview with Luis Antequera, author of a book that I'm probably not going to try to pronounce. Technically, it's not a return, as they know, although they continue to portray it as their own decision, that the Diocese of Toledo has strictly prohibited them from broadcasting again since March 6th. Perhaps for this reason, they've posted a comment on their YouTube channel, "Note, we're not back yet. This is a segment of the weekly program recorded last year that may be of interest these days." In any case, that doesn't change. What doesn't change is the style, and the insult is a sign of identity. In the images, Calvo introduces the guest as a writer on the website Religion en Libertad. Don't be mistaken for Religion Digital. They're not the communists from Religion Digital. Religion Digital is the garbage of the internet. This is what he was saying. Religion en Libertad is something else entirely. End quote. Next to him is a small flag with a pre-constitutional coat of arms, which is prohibited by the Democratic Memory Law. And that is that flag right there. I don't know that it's quite as bad as like having a swastika in the background, but it ain't good. That same cleric began one of the discussions by stating, "I pray a lot that Pope Francis can go to heaven as soon as possible." A wish shared by the other priests featured in the last video, so let's see if we pray harder. And then a few weeks later, Pope Francis, without directly mentioning them, spoke about the Spanish priest who wished him dead, saying they're not bad people, they're sad people, I feel sorry for them. So anyway, I wanted to mention that. I think that is interesting. Glenn Risden said there's a good documentary on YouTube about how powerful Francoism is in Spain. Do you know the name of that documentary, Glenn? If you put it in the chat, that'd be awesome. I am all for saving like good educational media like that. I actually have a couple of playlists over on my channel. One is just like entertainment movies that I've liked, but then the other one is like all documentaries, shorter and then like full feature-length documentaries about different human rights issues and also some like environmental issues and things as well. So if you're ever interested in looking for something a little bit more cerebral, you can go over and check out that playlist and maybe there's something on there for you. All right, so this next article, this was published, this was published March 26, 2025, and I'm just now seeing it. Okay. Only because we're short on time. I'm not going to read that one and just stay focused on what's going on last month. Sometimes that happens because the website will update some information in the article, and so then it'll get like an updated date of publication, basically, and so it'll look like it's more recent than it actually is. Sometimes it's cool because I've accidentally found some really interesting articles that way. Most of the time, though, it's just kind of misleading. So this was published on July 10th. It says, Mayor Valenzuela advances in real estate business with the endorsement of the Astral University. This is the second part of the deal. To achieve this, the mayor of Tres de Febrero personally turned to Gabriel Astroloa, a longtime Loretta official and current dean of law at the UA, who has been accused of fraudulent administration in the management of CABA lands and of dereliction of duty in the Time Warp case in which 5 young people died. Opus Dei, a defender of banks and businessmen and the municipal government. What are the benefits for the district's population? So it says, last Monday, an agreement between the Tres de Febrero municipality, headed by Diego Valenzuela, and the Universidad Astral, specifically the private institution's law school, was revealed and is pending approval by the city council. The agreement, signed by Valenzuela on June 12th with the dean of the Universidad Astral Law School, states that it is for technical legal cooperation and would be in exchange for a sum of 20 million pesos, which could rise to 100 million. The private university, owned by Opus Dei, an ultra-Catholic organization, as Paula Bistagnino put it, with a deep desire for power and multiple complaints of human trafficking and labor exploitation, seems to want to act as a guarantor of the real estate deal being pushed by the municipal government. And why do you think that might be? The two longtime acquaintances and officials of the then mayor of the autonomous city of Buenos Aires, Horacio Rodriguez Larreta, also attended the Freedom 2025 Foundation annual dinner, a gathering of the country's wealthy. The juggernaut Valenzuela, who speaks like Millet, who, remember, we just read about him a minute ago, against the establishment, does nothing but stock up on it so that everything stays in the family. The friendship between the officials is key to providing legal and technical advice on behalf of the university to the municipality, but above all because of his track record during his previous tenure in the Buenos Aires government. According to allegations from that time, Loretta's then Attorney General auctioned off land at ridiculously low prices to make way for large private real estate deals. This earned him a charge of fraudulent administration. The municipality of Tres de Febrero continues to turn a deaf ear to calls for green spaces and a halt to irrational building construction for speculative businesses. In Ciudad Jardín, as in Altos de Podesta, Martín Coronado, Villa Bosch, Santos, Lugares, etc., a large group of hundreds of residents have been protesting against urban expansion, demanding better living and health conditions for residents, and therefore in defense of the environment, but also against real estate speculation. So let's see if it says anything in here more about Astral. Not really, but I think it's really interesting that this Astral University is inserting itself as the guarantor of these properties, of this real estate. There's something that I've been learning about here recently because it ties into research that I have been doing and will be presenting soon if everything goes according to plan. I've been learning about something called land trafficking, and it's something that has actually come up quite a lot in regard to maybe not necessarily Opus Dei's activities in Latin America, although there are definitely cases like that, and this kind of is giving a whiff of that. I'm not saying that's what's happening here, but it's just kind of how it feels and sounds. But I lost my train of thought. I was going somewhere with that, and I was making a final point. Oh, but the land trafficking of it all. Something that I've been learning about, and it is something that specifically impacts Latin America. You can find research papers about it and everything as well, and it's basically using the legal system, the real estate system, to take lands from people like unjustly, basically. And it's a really big deal. It's really bad. Obviously it disproportionately impacts socioeconomically challenged areas, and it's a big deal. And so when I saw this about this Astral University, this Opus Dei school, which, let's just be real, Opus Dei does not have the best track record anymore when it comes to like handling money and people and that kind of thing, you know, but they want to insert themselves as a guarantor in this real estate deal, and that just it made a red flag go up in my brain. So I wanted to mention it here. Maybe we'll see nothing more about it. Maybe everything's fine. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's all or nothing. But my intuition tells me otherwise. So I wanted to mention it. And we'll see. So, next article, moving right along. Lopez Aliaga pays more than $5 million for rotten chicken blood for soup kitchens. This was July 12th. It would be to benefit members of the Opus Dei sect, of which the mayor is an important member, since the beneficiary consortium has the name San Jose Maria, an allusion to the name of the founder of said sect, Jose Maria Escriva de Balaguer. The mayor of Lima, Rafael Lopez Aliaga, accused in various media of managing the metropolitan municipality of Lima in the style of Pedro Castillo and the Saratia House, that is, meeting outside the MML, is involved in a new scandal, this time for paying more than $5 million. I don't know if it's pesetas or... So I'm just going to say $5 million, a lot of money, for rotten chicken blood for soup kitchens, which demonstrates the value he places on poor families for whose areas he asked for votes during his campaign, saying he would provide food to soup kitchens and beautify the hills. None of his promises have been fulfilled, and even now the soup kitchens are still waiting for the aid offered, and he hasn't beautified the areas of poverty. The case, made known by Salud Conlupa, involves within the MML the human development manager of the Rafael Lopez Aliaga administration responsible for the program, who suspiciously records at least 5 meetings with the representative of the beneficiary company. Community kitchen leaders in districts such as San Juan de Lurigancho and San Juan de Miraflores warned that the bags delivered by the Metropolitan Municipality of Lima had a nauseating, clearly rotten smell. The smell alone made those who experienced it nauseous and wanted to vomit. Afterwards, municipal officials brazenly posted a video on WhatsApp claiming that the strong smell is characteristic of chicken blood and that, when cooked, it tastes delicious, a mockery of these consumers who are well versed in the product and usually buy it fresh from the market. Salud Conlupa reported that the San Jose Maria Consortium, responsible for distributing 673,000 kilos of packaged refrigerated chicken blood, was created on May 15, 2025, and signed the contract with the municipality of Lima just 12 days later. It is comprised of Negociaciones Valentina Carr and the Corporación Jose Maria. The latter was founded in 2015 but only began declaring operations in 2024 and has no history of participating in public bidding processes. Probably because it's brand new. The contract reached $5,760,477 at the price per kilo, even higher than the value of eviscerated chicken in Lima's retail markets, according to reports from the Ministry of Agrarian Development and Irrigation for July 2025. Additionally, the current Human Development Manager held at least 5 meetings with the manager of these Corporación Jose Maria, Rodrigo Ramos Rojas, between 2023 and 2025. Ayala had experience being linked to sordid affairs from a state position to manipulate people's needs for her own benefit. That's the current head Human Development Manager, Isabel Ayala. And they're saying that she's under investigation for bribery and embezzlement. In 2020, when she was an official at the municipality of Independencia, the comptroller's office detected serious irregularities in the delivery of food baskets during the pandemic. I remember reading about this. In 2023, an audio recording was released in which she agreed to receive 18 tons of food for soup kitchens in exchange for arranging a meeting between merchants and Mayor Rafael Lopez Aliaga. So there is a long history here. Some might say precedent of these impoverished communities in this area not getting the resources that they were promised, because their government officials are just completely dropping the ball. And look, they say here this business would be a benefit to members of the Opus Dei sect, and the mayor is a member of it, since the beneficiary consortium is named San Jose Maria. And it says that from its beginnings in Spain, Opus Dei was involved in so many scandals that it was known as the Holy Mafia. And once again, members of Opus Dei, like this mayor, are causing scandal among Catholics and the general public. It's really true. It's really true. And it's really sad. And it makes you wonder, maybe Opus Dei needs to clean house a little bit. But they, makes you wonder why they don't. Because it seems like that would be the obvious solution. You wouldn't want somebody like this representing your organization doing something like this, which is so clearly in violation of like just Christian morality, right? You're supposed to uplift the afflicted and feed the hungry and shelter the homeless and all these other things, and that's clearly not happening there. So, moving right along, how many more do I have to go? Oh, Lord have mercy. I don't know if we're going to get through every single one of these articles. I'm going to do my best to get through as much of them as I can in the allotted time that I have. But if I do end up running out and we can't get through all of them, again, you can go and read through the ones that I didn't get to down in the source document down below. So, Slaves of Opus Dei. This is published, like I said, July 13th. The successor of the world leadership of Opus Dei Argentine, Mariano Fazio, is charged with trafficking women as domestic servants. Four of the predecessors, over half a century, must also answer questions before the federal courts presided over by Judge Daniel Rafecas. Opus Dei took girls as young as 12 from the interior of Paraguay, Uruguay, or Bolivia. They took them away from their poor families under the pretext of providing them with education, housing, and employment, but they only taught them housework and never paid them for their work, which was taken as part of their rent, all in the name of God. In 2018, Paula Bistagnino published in Revista Lento her first article about Opus Dei's modus operandi for recruiting teenagers and its members' wills. This brought her closer to a fact. For Montevideo, there was a case file that could escape the secrecy of the courts. The international reach grew. Paraguayan Lucia Jimenez recounted that in 18 years, I never received a peso for my work. Another compatriot, Nydia Ojeda arrived at 13. Once she received mail, they made her destroy it. Norma Pedroso, 14, had a talcum powder she had received from her mother stolen, and she was taken as a domestic servant to Rome. And the stories just go on. And on and on. The story of the 43 exploited women was first told in Argentina around November 2020 in Afabia, a digital university magazine. International media coverage may have precipitated the Pope's decision to limit Opus Dei's autonomy, leading some media outlets to describe the Vatican's decision to demote the ultra-conservative organization embraced by John Paul II as historic. Let's see. 1 year after the Argentine complaint, the case prompted interviews on the Chamber of Deputies television channel and a request for information to see the list of priests, leaders from the Frente de Todos party, among whose signatories were these people, former ambassador of the Holy. The investigation was nominated for the New Journalism Foundation Award. El País informed the world that 4 former Opus Dei officials were facing judicial charges for trafficking in women. It targeted the highest authorities of Opus Dei in Argentina. And then a month ago, prosecutors Alejandra Mangano, Marcelo Colombo, and Eduardo Tayano sent Judge Rafecas a request for an indictment that also included Fazio. It says this successor is accused of being part of the system of trafficking poor women for labor exploitation that the project designed and executed, according to the 8-page document requesting his subpoena for questioning. Of course, the work has rejected the accusations, downplaying the complaints. It says if Opus Dei seeks to avoid setting precedents, it has none, except for 2 European cases. The complaint, filed by a French woman in 2001, it started in 2001 and didn't conclude until 2016, for concealed work and remuneration contrary to dignity, which resulted in a conviction for a civil association linked to the work, and another collective case in Spain around 2011, which was settled before going to trial. In Argentina, if the law is consistent, the same criteria should be applied as to other sects with less influence or connections. And it says that Opus Dei's statement states that the girls received, like any citizen, compensation for their work and private social security, among other benefits. However, okay, so here's a fun palate cleanser. So maybe it was last month or the month before, I mentioned this guy who's been on my radar for a little while now, Italo Marsili. And the reason why is because he is a high-profile member of Opus Dei in Brazil. He is kind of like a self-help guru. I've compared him to kind of like a Jordan Peterson, although I've been told by people from Brazil who are aware of his work that he's not nearly as well educated as Jordan Peterson. And he definitely postures as like this intellectual mental health professional, which is interesting, right? And that's another common theme that we see with these people in Opus Dei, these like male doctors, and maybe there are women too. I guess there are, because I can think of a couple of examples, but you have these Opus Dei members, these high profile members, posturing as like mental health professionals or as doctors, or whatever the case may be, and then making like broad sweeping recommendations about how people should live their life based off of their like perception of the world and their, I guess, ostensible education, but that's kind of questionable sometimes. And this guy is an interesting bird. He's hyper present online. He has a pretty solid following in Brazil, and here recently he started writing for this Gazeta do Povo, and I remember seeing that he had been hired by them, and it was a big deal and everyone was very excited about it. And then this past month, this article that he wrote got delivered to my inbox, and it's just really something to see, and I wanted to take a minute to read it. So here's his like professional bio. So he's a psychiatrist, married with 8 children, the founder of one of Brazil's largest digital educational entrepreneurship groups. He specializes in education, mental health, audio-visual media, and social impact, which I don't know what those are. He is the creator of Gorilla Way, the largest subscription-based personal development program in the country. He also created the Italo Marsili certification and is the author of bestsellers such as Gorilla Therapy and Praise of the Four Temperaments and The Magician's Hat. So he wrote this article. It was a pause, it was a write, it was unspeakable. It's got this tag, artificial intelligence. And I'm just going to start reading it, and you let me know what you think. Just the first paragraph. I spend little time on social media, he writes, much less than some might assume. Not out of virtue, but out of lack of time, really. I don't know who the current commentators are. I confuse the names of politicians with those of former students. I really don't have much of a calling as a digital valet. Mind you, I've never been on a podcast. Actually, I did go to one. 2 dear friends, neighbors, were starting a business and invited me. I went. Today they're a success. I don't have the patience, I confess. I also confess something else, the subject of this digression in text form. I've been feeling nauseous lately, more frequently than usual. A sublingual veau noir a day in the morning, accompanying the shredded chicken tapioca that Renata lovingly prepares for me. Ivona 8 milligram over the counter. I did a quick Google search. 200 rays for a box of 30 tablets, a month of the medication, 200. It's worth it. Sorry, let's get back to the boring topic. Texts produced by GPT chat. They're very, very cheesy. They're incredibly cheesy. I tried. Those who work with me can attest to my enthusiasm for the advent of a little machine capable of conversing with us as if it were a human being, using something so rare that I didn't mind its artificiality. Intelligence. What? I'll read on. I signed up in 2023. Excited, I explored the possibilities. I read articles in English and connected with engineers and developers. At my college, yes, I own a college, we offer a course on artificial intelligence, which is very good, by the way. Everything. I did everything, I swear. At this point, the reader can sense my disappointment. Can we? the weariness, the disbelief, the blood of someone, the blood of someone who's been beaten and lost. This is me. I want to be pedantic now. Who's been beaten and lost. This is me. I want to be pedantic now. I wasn't defeated by age, by the generation gap, but by my aesthetic sense. And there's nothing more unsightly than a text produced by GPT. No matter the prompt offered, no matter the operator, GPT has in recent months been wearing a crappy little jacket with crappy little slippers on its feet and a crappy little mustache on its face and a deodorant that isn't deodorant but natural milk of something in his armpits, and this whole package of things without any basis, culture, or depth, ... a tragedy. Do you know what the biggest tragedy is? Scrolling through your Instagram feed and realizing two things. 99% of the texts were written to have 99% of the texts written have been written by GPT. This is sad, but it's not a tragedy. The tragedy comes next. The comments. Wow, you took the words right out of my mouth. Amazing, you read minds. I was moved. General ignorance. Death of the aesthetic sense. Can't you hear a machine's voice and discern that those little words sound robotic? The digital mob doesn't have the minimum level of culture to distinguish the human voice. So he goes on in this vein pretty much for the rest of it, and it gets harder and harder to read as you go along. It's kind of an exercise, honestly, in like reading comprehension. If you feel like challenging yourself, go for it. But I read this thing, and then he gets my latest model iPhone loaded with apps. $192 on Mercado Libre, free shipping, cheaper than a box of Vonau, 8 milligrams. I wanted to stay away from all this for now. The last straw happened a couple of days ago. A friend sent me a text on the occasion of my daughter's birth. It was a work of fiction, an original short story. He sent it via WhatsApp. It was a long text. Did you write it? I asked. He sent me an emoji of sunglasses. I didn't say yes or no. It was a pause. It was a ritual. It was unspeakable. So, I didn't know what to think when I read this, and I thought maybe I'm missing something. Is this guy brilliant and I'm just not seeing the point? And then I scrolled down and I realized there are 45 comments on this blog post of his. And I decided I wanted to see what they said. And they let me see last time. So let me see if it'll pull him up this. Yes. Let's see. There was a few that I saw. I'm going to hire an AI to interpret this premature ejaculation that you called an authorial text. Ouch. This person said the text is well constructed and engaging. However, nothing adds up. From the text, we capture only the author's emotional perception of himself, whether natural or artificial. In the times we live in, a dictatorship that persecutes many, imprisons some, and sickens many, we would love to see courageous, strong, and voracious authors for truth, freedom, and faith. But we have authors with inflamed egos, sickened by applause. It's better to be a fictional author, a chronicler of unreality, than, in fact, an author who analyzes and seeks ways to ennoble the reader's spirit. In the end, cowardice and arrogance, it seems, can be well camouflaged by excellent writing. And that pretty much sums up my feelings about this premature ejaculation. And I don't know, I'm not going to be keeping up with Italo's writing to see if the rest of what he publishes on Gazzetta del Povo is in this theme. But this was a wild ride of a read, honestly. And I feel like I can't do a good Trump impersonation, but I feel like if you got somebody who could do a really good Trump impersonation to read this, it would sound like something Trump would say. It's that level of like just like mental thought vomit coming out, which is fine, you know, like on a certain level, mental thought vomit, you know, we all have our moments. You could describe what I do here on this live stream as mental thought vomit at a certain scale because I'm just reading the news and waxing eloquent about it. But this just felt different. This was just kind of on a different level of like insanity. And he writes as if he's telling a joke or referring to a joke that everyone else who is reading this is in on with him and like on the same page with him. And I think he's assuming way too much. But anyway, I thought that was really funny. I wanted to include it. It's a little bit of something light compared to like all the rest of the stuff that we were reading about. On July 18th, Info Vaticana published this article. It says Opus Dei strengthens its pastoral care with an office of healing and listening. Now, I think it's kind of crazy that it's taken until 2025 for Opus Dei to develop protocols to deal with people who leave the organization unhappy, but here we are. And I guess they've decided to do that by creating this Office of Healing and Listening for people who've been a part of the prelature and wish to share their experience. It says that it's independent, apparently, of the internal government of the work, and was created with the aim of welcoming, guiding, and where appropriate, channeling requests from those who have felt wounded during their time within the institution. They have some stuff about Jose Maria Escriva's perspective and how that contributed to things. New office, new stage. It says that because not all former members are grateful for their time within the prelature. That's crazy. This says, although many former members are grateful for their time within the prelature, others have expressed dissatisfaction for various reasons. And so they have this email address that they say was open on March 6th, 2024. I thought it had been around longer than that. That's sad. And then the office is being coordinated by this Jose Maria Roman, who's a law graduate. And it's made up of a group of professionals with experience in fields such as psychology, social work, spirituality, education, and pastoral care. Now, I'm scrolling through here. Yep, and this is the end of the article. And there's nothing linking to any type of, like, guiding document that they are following in order to implement this Office of Healing and Listening. No type of, like, nothing really substantial for that the public can, like, go and look at and see, oh, this is how this organization is handling this situation. These are the steps that it would take in following, like, these circumstances. These are the people who are overseeing this, blah, blah, blah. Like, they mentioned this email address in here. It's saying it was a specific channel. And then they took the step to formalize the initiative of creating this email address through the creation of this Office of Listening and Healing. So this is like the part 2 to this thing. And it says that a stable and qualified team has been formed. But aside from saying who's coordinating this thing, this Jose Maria Roman, and I'm sure that he's perfectly competent, but it doesn't mention who else is on this panel, this board, in this Office of Healing and Listening. No details about how anything's going to be carried out. And I don't know, I think a little bit of transparency would go a long way for a lot of people. And this does not feel like a transparent effort being made in good faith, really. It just sounds like a wider net that, in my opinion, it sounds like a wider net they're casting to try to catch things before they spiral out of their control. Try to catch things before they end up with another lawsuit, maybe. I don't know. I'm underwhelmed. Let me know what you think, if you think this is just awesome and amazing. I'm underwhelmed by it, honestly. Oh, but then look here, on July 17th, El Debate published Opus Dei admits errors and shortcomings in its dealings with former members and opens its first office to assist them. So they'll admit there have been some errors. But they've opened this Office of Healing and Listening to better help people who have left this path and who have become dissatisfied. Everything in the way that this is written does nothing to, like, create the impression of an institution that is taking the, like, experiences of former members seriously. If the experience that a former member is alleging to have had deviates from the acceptable standardized norm, then it all becomes this gigantic game of, like, othering and obfuscation and just, like, referring to these people's trauma as dissatisfaction. We're not talking about dissatisfaction here, right? This is not somebody getting a dish at a restaurant that was maybe a little bit colder than they would have liked. We're talking about literal crimes. We're talking about people being deprived of the most basic, fundamental aspects of human rights. And we're talking about that happening repeatedly. So this kind of, like, light language it is insulting to me, I find that insulting, honestly. Not like it's insulting to me, like they did it to me, but I find it insulting. I find it insulting to the people who have been trying to get their stories heard and trying to get some type of acknowledgement of what they've gone through. I don't know if they're ever going to get it from this organization. I don't know that this organization on its own is ever going to be able to reach a point where it can acknowledge that the ways that things have been getting done have been disordered and wrong. I would like to be proven wrong, but I don't know that I will be. Let's see. Oh, I'm going to skip this one for now just because it doesn't tie in as well as I would prefer to cover it. Let's see. This article, I'm kind of trying to move quickly because I only have about another 20 minutes. Yeah, Ian said, I'm incredibly cynical of this Office of Healing and Listening. Me too. That's what I'm saying. I don't like, it doesn't sound sincere to me. It really, really doesn't. And it's hard to take them seriously and believe that they are like being authentic when the language, again, that they're using is just, it's very blasé. It does not reflect a true appreciation of what we're actually talking about here. And I have a real problem with that. So this was published on July 20th. We're moving through the month. This is how Opus Dei handed over Ruiz Mateo's Rumasa to the PSOE for expropriation. So this is more foreign politics. But again, like I said, pay attention to what's happening around the world. Not because I want you to be afraid of it, but just because you can start to notice some patterns. And when you pick up on those patterns, it makes it a little, I don't know, I feel like it makes it a little bit easier to deal with the world, to move through the world, to feel like you're not about to go crazy and pull your hair out. Maybe not everybody feels that way, but I definitely get something like that out of like learning about this stuff, even when it doesn't necessarily directly have anything to do with my country. I'm not stupid enough to think that just because it doesn't have something to do directly with my country that it is like not important. I just don't think that is a healthy way to look at the world. So this Rumasa, Ruiz Mateos, and the inside story of an expropriation. This Sunday, Juan Luis Galiaco, the director of elsierradigital.com, appears on the program Anatomy of with Mamen Mendizabal, sorry if I butchered that, to analyze what happened during the expropriation of Rumasa in 1983 and the subsequent conflict between Ruiz Mateos and the then Minister of Economy, Finance and Trade, Miguel Boyer. The La Sexta program closes the season by breaking down everything that happened around the Cadiz-born businessman's empire. Despite his death on September 7th, 2015, Ruiz Mateo's influence lives on. But before that war, the businessman was betrayed by Opus Dei. The collaboration with Opus Dei, also known as The Work, which Don Jose Maria Ruiz Mateos kept alive for many years, dates back to the years in which Alvaro del Portillo assumed the responsibility of succeeding Don Jose Maria Escriva de Balaguer, today elevated to the altar as father of the prelature of the Holy Cross and Opus Dei. And this is that Ruiz Mateos guy. It is very useful to recall the early years of Alvaro del Portillo's as a father of the work. The following is a brief account of the events. Don Jose Maria Ruiz Mateos established contact with Don Jose Maria Escriva de Balaguer, now elevated to sainthood. In fact, he joined Opus Dei in 1963 as a supernumerary member. Jose Maria Ruiz Mateos accepted and assumed the special preponderance that another numerary member of Opus Dei had over him, especially designated for this case, Luis Valls Taberner, to whom Jose Maria Ruiz Mateos professed blind faith, obedience, and full submission as brothers in faith. And if you have read or listened to enough interviews about Gareth Gore's book Opus, you should know that name, Luis Valls Taberner, and the situation that was surrounding him, and how he was tied up in the collapse of that bank, which was what alerted Gareth to the fact that there was something to investigate. If you haven't read Opus or like listened to some interviews or something about it, I highly recommend. It's a really good history lesson too. Always obedient and faithful to the instructions and guidance given to him by Luis Valls Taberner, Jose Maria Ruiz Mateos continued to develop Rumasa's business. However, the death of the founder of Opus Dei, Escriva, had a special impact on Jose Maria. But his faith and obedience to the work remained a constant in his belonging to Opus Dei, reinforced even further by the succession of Father Jose Maria Escriva, who was succeeded by Del Portillo. All this took place in 1975. During various pastoral visits, Ruiz Mateos had the privilege of meeting Del Portillo. As a faithful son of the work, he encouraged him to support the implementation of social and educational initiatives that Opus Dei sought to carry out through the world. IESE was one of Opus Dei's institutes created in 1981 by Del Portillo with the intention of collecting money from its members. The sum of the funds diverted by Ruiz Mateos' companies to the work is estimated at more than $50 million, according to Spanish newspapers, but this figure is merely the tip of the iceberg. In reality, larger sums were at stake, as evidenced by the sums that passed from Rumasa to Opus Dei, such as $10 million he donated to the University of Navarra. Through the extreme obedience to which he was subjected, he allowed the Opus Dei strategists, led by Luis Valls Taberner, to use his corporation in every way, to the point that at Rumasa, 8 of the 15 general directors belonged to Opus Dei. When he was asked for $10 million for the University of Navarra, he gave it anyway without question. In this sense, Ruiz Mateos, a supernumerary member of the Opus Dei, of super interesting dependence, of super blind obedience, and brother in faith by the men who governed the Opus Dei, Del Portillo was squeezed to the max. The financial requirements of Opus Dei were vast. With 5 South American universities modeled after the University of Navarre, a dozen existing or planned educational institutions around the globe, and the Teresidad Sanctuary, which cost around $30 million, the work needed to turn to a group of companies like Rumasa. Among his social and educational initiatives were the Juncabal Training Center, the Canal Technical and Labor Education Center, the Foundation for Integral Development in Guatemala, the Montemira School, the Lama Tepec School, the Sarima Women's Educational Training Center in El Salvador, the Uruguayan Association of Family Agrarian Schools in Uruguay, a whole bunch more. These are just a small sample of the initiatives promoted by Del Portillo, initiatives that benefited from the contributions made by Jose Maria Ruiz Mateos, and initiatives that were all ultimately tied back to Opus Dei. The expansion of the Rumasa group knew no bounds. In response, the Bank of Spain warned Mr. Jose Maria Ruiz Mateos in 1978 to ease off the accelerator. It also requested an audit of the holding company's accounts and appointed Navarro Rubio as its auditor. But Jose Maria Ruiz Mateos, at the urging of Luis Valls Taberner, had no intention of disclosing the holding company's accounts because they would be exposed, and the transfers made to the Opus Dei network in Spain and abroad would have been exposed. It must be understood that Rumasa was privately owned by Ruiz Mateos, his 4 brothers, one of them a Redemptorist priest, and his sister, but there was also a hidden partner in Rumasa, Opus Dei. Rumasa was also a highly diversified group with its own banks in Spain and abroad. This meant it could be used both to camouflage international transfers and to extract multi-million-dollar contributions to the work. Rumasa was a key company for Opus Dei due to its confidentiality, flexibility, availability, and fungibility, all very important characteristics for the strategists who governed Opus Dei. But faithfully, Ruiz Mateos was yet to experience the most bitter and horrific experience of his life, the expropriation of Rumasa. This event naturally attracted the utmost attention from the media, which, leaving aside the economic and financial problem itself, was focused on how the PSOE government's actions would treat the banks and the church, and more specifically Opus Dei, which at that time had just been established as a personal prelature. The general opinion was inclined toward the evidence of a conspiratorial action between representatives of the 7 major Spanish banks. The Spanish Banking Association, whose president was Rafael Termes, a full member of Opus Dei, the president of Banco Popular, Mr. Luis Valls Taberner, a full member of Opus Dei, and Felipe González Marquez, president of the government of Spain. Rumasa would be the bargaining chip that would ensure that nothing would tarnish the friendly relations that would have existed between the socialists, big business, and the church, even if they were just remnants of the legacy of the Franco dictatorship. Following the expropriation, Ruiz Mateos, following the advice of Luis Valls Taberner, fled to London on March 4, 1983. On April 25, 1985, Ruiz Mateos was arrested at Frankfurt Airport. On December 1st, he was extradited to Spain from Germany. During the bitter ordeal of his stay abroad, he realized that he had, in fact, been used as a scapegoat. In fact, to save face, his friends and Opus Dei had plotted a conspiracy that made him a scapegoat. Jose Maria Ruiz Mateos tried to defend himself against the calamitous betrayal of which the Opus Dei leaders had framed him. He turned to Father Alvaro del Portillo, desperately seeking and pleading for help that never came. Heartbroken and disappointed with both the Obra and Alvaro del Portillo, Ruiz Mateos rejected Luis Val's advice. He tried to defend himself, but it was too late. In May 1986, the leadership of Opus Dei, along with Del Portillo, gave Ruiz Mateos an ultimatum. They would expel him from the organization if he did not withdraw the accusations he was making against Luis Val's Taberner. But Jose Maria Ruiz Mateos did not mince his words and continued with his defense. Those who decisively influenced the handing over of Ruiz Mateos to the socialists were the full members of the Opus Dei Sanhedrin. Continuing with this paradox, it turns out that the rulers of Opus Dei, headed by Alvaro del Portillo and mediated by Luis Val's Taberner and Rafael Termes, full members of Opus Dei, ignominiously handed Jose Maria Ruiz Mateos over to the socialist enemy as a bargaining chip for favors and political advantages that Opus Dei would later obtain. This was the true driving force behind the expropriation of Ramasa. So I thought that was a pretty interesting story, pretty interesting situation, and I wanted to share it and highlight it. Let me know what you think down below. Oh, and I had pulled up, because I had never heard of this Jose Maria Ruiz Mateos person, so I had pulled him up on Wikipedia just to see what there was to say about him, and really there isn't a lot. He was imprisoned, it says, on charges of currency smuggling, fraud, and tax evasion, and then after several years in jail, he went back to public life. He's the father of 13 children. And then, yes, it says that on February 17th, 2011, the 10 largest companies within the Nueva Ramasa group were declared in default and unable to make payments to their creditors, and they were expropriated by the Spanish government. So that was a situation I hadn't really heard a whole lot about, never really heard anything about, if I'm being honest, and I thought it was really interesting, especially because it ties in with everything that Gareth Gore wrote about in Opus with Luis Val's Taberner. So I wanted to include it. Alrighty, so I think I'm gonna do this article, and then I'm gonna pick one more from my list, and then we're gonna call it a day there. So this is from a Spanish news site, Trump and the Far Right Stalk Latin America. This is a part 1. This was published on July 20th by Francisco Blanco Calderon. And look here, Italo Marcilli would be incensed. According to ChatGPT, in Mexico, the term far right is used to describe groups and political parties that adopt extreme positions within the right, characterized by false nationalism, conservatism, authoritarianism, and often xenophobia, racism, anti-abortion views, sexual preferences, and, above all, rejection of immigration. It is generally associated with ideologies that promote authoritarianism, exacerbated nationalism, and the defense of traditional and conservative values, often in opposition to multiculturalism in open societies. The new right in Mexico refers to an emerging phenomenon of political groups and figures who identify with the far right but seek to differentiate themselves or even distance themselves from the National Action Party and traditional religious groups such as Opus Dei, El Yunque, the Knights of Columbus, and the Legionaries of Christ. The new right includes figures such as Eduardo Verastegui and Sandra Cuevas, who are exploring new political platforms and alliances, often with a more ultra-conservative focus. The far right, rooted in synarchism, made an appearance at the previous Conservative Political Action Conference led by Eduardo Verastegui, who gave the Nazi salute, citing the example of men close to Trump after declaring himself part of the movement. The INE officially authorized him, rosary in hand, to form his political party, Viva Mexico Movement. At a gala dinner organized by the American Society and co-sponsored by Ricardo Salinas Pliego, the United States ambassador to Mexico, Ronald Johnson, affirmed that his country seeks to return to the path of freedom with rights, justice, and economic opportunity. Businessman Ricardo Salinas Pliego did not take the microphone, despite being a co-sponsor. Ronald Johnson reaffirmed the United States' stance on the fight against cartels and drug trafficking. Mexican Larry Rubin of the American Society criticized the Mexican government's lack of effective action on security issues and compliance with the USMCA. Verestagui was absent, and the ambassador, a Green Beret and former CIA officer, had said at a previous dinner, "Thank you to Mexico, to my brother, and to everyone present." Trump's strong suit for 2030 in Mexico, along with Bolsonaro in Brazil and Corina Machado in Venezuela, endorsed by Novoa of Ecuador, Bolarute of Peru, Molino Quintero of Panama, and Bukele of El Salvador, and Milei of Argentina. They're going after Chile, Bolivia, and Honduras in 2025, and Colombia, Costa Rica, and Nicaragua in 2026. Would the radical right have the potential to intervene in Mexico's new political system? In their attempt to remove Morena from power, the PRI and PAN distanced themselves from their base and electorate. Furthermore, they lost focus on the values and ideological principles they championed to secure public office positions. Let's see. Trump is leading the far right against the fourth transformation governments, recruiting analysts from the mainstream press, organic intellectuals, well-respected radio and TV hosts, the Catholic hierarchy, and domestic business elites. The leaders of this country, where the opposition, unarmed by principles and values, leaves a juicy gap for the penetration of conservative ideologies. Actor and producer Eduardo Verestagui, who already unsuccessfully attempted an independent candidacy for the 2024 elections, but with his new party, the Viva Mexico movement. Today, as yesterday, he will not find a smooth road, but the Republican winds blowing from the United States may fill the sails a little more. Verastagui's political movement displays the unmistakable coat of arms of the far right: life, family, and liberty, proclaiming a managerial state. It shelters itself with Trump's allies: Bukele in his mega prison, Milei without the state oil company, and Santiago Abascal, leader of Vox in Spain, who lend money and share ideologies. The two largest Latin American economies, Mexico and Brazil, are a coveted dish for the far right. In Mexico, Verestagui, Trump-Johnson would be the case, and in Brazil, Lula da Silva with scoldings and tariffs. Trump boosts Bolsonaro, Mexico proves to be a tough nut to crack, and Brazil strengthens with the BRICS. Trump prepares for his third election with the Latin American vote. That is a quote attributed to Carmen Moran Barrena from El País. So, like I said, there's like a wave that's kind of wrapping around the world of like similar things happening politically and within governments in all of these different countries. And it's interesting to see how things kind of are happening in tandem, which is why I continue to bring these articles up and highlight the similarities, just because I think it's interesting and it's important to be aware of. Now, for my last article, let's close out with this one. This is an interview with an ex-numerary, Belan Gonzalez. She's done quite a bit of Spanish press talking about her experience, and I want to elevate that. So we'll read this article here. This was published on July 30th, so the very end of the month. Belan Gonzalez, former numerary, asks Opus Dei to learn from their mistakes. Quote, "It will help them become wiser and more humble." The young woman was recruited by Opus Dei when she was just 11 years old. Little by little, she began participating in activities until at 14 they began talking to her about her vocation. So from the time that she was 11 years old, she was being groomed to join this organization. So she was a numerary from 2011 to 2016, very recently. As she explained to Ropero, she was recruited when she was very young. "I always played with my friends after school, and there was a time in 6th grade when they went to the club on Fridays," she said. The young woman was curious to know what the club was about and asked to go with them. "That's when I started to have more contact with the schools," she added. Belan continued participating in the institution's activities until, at the age of 14, people began talking to her about her vocation. "I spoke once a week with a numerary who was your spiritual director, to whom you had to open up," she said, "and should join Opus Dei. It was this numerary who suggested whether and how she should join Opus Dei." Her parents are supernumeraries. In her case, when they asked her what she could do within the organization, she expressed that she wanted to be a mother and therefore believed she should be a supernumerary like her parents. They told me, Baylan, that would be a partial commitment, and you have to make a total commitment as a numerary, she recalled. Being a numerary, as she explained to Ropero, means giving yourself completely, on a physical level and in terms of salary. Your family is Opus Dei. You have no chance of getting married or having a relationship or a partner, she added. Gonzalez explained to Andrea that she reached a point where her workload was so high that she couldn't take it anymore. One day, my throat got really sore. I started vomiting and I began to have an anxiety attack. I knew my body was telling me I'd had enough, she added. For her, the hardest part was discovering it was all a lie. It's a show you're living in. There are people manipulating you like a puppet, and you don't believe it. Her membership in Opus Dei, as she noted, has had an impact on her relationships. For example, I have accepted some things I shouldn't have accepted, she said. The young woman participated in a documentary titled The Heroic Minute, I Too Left Opus Dei, in which several former members of Opus Dei recounted their experiences. Gonzalez stated that if members of Opus Dei saw the documentary, she would like to look them in the eye and have them ask for forgiveness. Let them stop violating souls, she reflected, and let them learn from their own mistakes, which is what will make them wiser and more humble if that is what they want to be. Good advice, and I think Opus Dei should take it. But I don't know that they will. So, anyway, that concludes the articles that I'm going to read for the time being. Let's see. Pop over here. Let me go ahead and shrink this down, and I'll go turn my webcam back on so that I can see while I say goodbye. One moment. Okay, somebody just let me know that my audio is still off. So I've been like sitting here saying goodbye and talking into a void. So that's great. For this live stream, even with all of the little things that were going on and going wrong. We got through it, and that's the main thing. Let me know what your thoughts are on the articles that we did go over. Give this live stream a thumbs up if you haven't already. It helps out a whole lot. And if you are interested in seeing more of my work, obviously there's the YouTube channel and the podcast and everything, but then also I have written work over on my Substack, Beck Griffin and the Deep Dive Project. And if you want to keep up with what's happening with the Deep Dive Project in between these live streams and the episodes that I publish, then you can follow me on social media. I have it all down below as well, and you can find me there. If there is somebody that you think that I should talk to, someone that I should interview, or a situation that you think that I should research, send me an email or leave a comment down below. I do check every single comment. If you are watching this retroactively after the live stream has ended, no worries, and thank you so much for watching it anyway. I appreciate the participation, like I said, and I am extremely grateful for the fact that there are so many people here who are interested in hearing this information as much as I am interested in presenting it. So, with all of that said, that is where I am going to leave things for now. I'm going to end this, and I will see you for the next deep dive or the next next interview or the next newsroom analysis, whichever one comes first. So thank you, and have a great rest of your day.